Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 216. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. Dave, you would not believe how many times we get asked in the comments what PEP stands for, even though I say it at the beginning of every single episode. That's Planet Extra podcast. I'm a host of Planet America on ABC Australia, and this is an official podcast of the ABCs. Repeat, this is an official podcast, so you can complain about me to the Ombudsman. Yes, you can. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can find us on YouTube at the PEP with Chaz and Dr. Dave channel, and you can also see highlights on the PEP Clips YouTube channel, and we're on Facebook as well on the Chaz from Planet America channel. That's right. That address has changed. So much change. I'm scared. You'll also find timestamps and show notes in our blurbs. And if you leave a comment under our current episode video, we're likely to see it. You can also tweet us or blue sky us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PepChaz Dr. Dave. If you want to chat to some fellow Peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen now or in the blurb of the podcast. But if you want to contact me or Lockie the Lackey privately, why not email us? The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. That address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com. And in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be on a break, and then I'm going to read them all. Apologies to anyone who wrote something urgent. And we are recording this at 1:30 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, in case you're wondering. Hey, Chaz from the future here. Like I said, we recorded this on Thursday, and it seemed that everything that we talked about went to hell last night. There's a lot of developments. We've got a few updates at the end of this podcast for you. If you're wondering if we're going to talk about some of the things that happened overnight, I will talk about some of them, not all of them. I don't know exactly how long, 17 minutes, 20 minutes or so of the pod, you'll see me by myself and no Dave. I'll address some of the things that happened overnight. But for now, why don't we go back to the main pod and just remind ourselves what happened yesterday. But for now, let's turn to the man who will never raise the stakes on inconsequential views. I'm talking about Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. David Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or in many cases, I know, good very late evening. I am David Smith. I'm an associate professor at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, but I do not speak for either of those institutions, and I certainly don't speak for the ABC. Chaz, a few decades ago, there was this I suppose you call him street philosopher in Sydney called Les Paul, who used to self-publish these insane tracts that he would foist on people. And he had this theory that everything that the ABC did was actually directly speaking for Queen Elizabeth.
Wow.
Because Queen Elizabeth was the nominal head of state of Australia under some legal interpretations, and so therefore an organ of the Australian government was directly speaking for her.
It had to be the ABC that was that organ.
That's right. He blamed Queen Elizabeth directly for Andrew Olley's death because of the fact that the ABC had refused to commission a documentary based on his theory that people should only eat fruit grown from trees that they had urinated on because that was the way of fighting cancer.
Well, look, there's a lot of viewers out there, including my dad, who thinks the ABC is an organ, but not that kind of organ.
Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting. Look, I got to say, I feel like cranks have improved. They've lifted their game over the years. You're talking about Les Paul. He's not sounding interesting to me. I'm more interested in Time Cube guy.
Oh, yes.
who, by the way, he died.
Oh, no.
I think the page is still archivable, though. Which is good news for everyone. If you got to spare half an hour and you like crazy, I recommend you look up Time Cube. But anyway, Dave, what are you grateful for?
Well, by the time this PEP goes out, I'm sure everyone will have seen many well-deserved tributes to Brian Wilson, who died today on the time that we're recording. One of the great musical figures of the 20th century. If you want something to read about him, I highly recommend a story that was collected in Nick Kent's book, The Dark Stuff, called The Last Beach Movie Revisited. It's a long read. It's like 60-something pages, but it really goes through Brian Wilson's decline period very well. Because for those of you who don't know, Brian Wilson was a massive, massive drug casualty. And like for a lot of his life, he was really kind of easy prey for a lot of manipulative psychopaths, beginning with his own father, but also like this weird psychiatrist. I don't know if he actually was a psychiatrist called Eugene Landy, who controlled him for a lot of the time. Anyway, he did very well to overcome all of that. I can't mention Brian Wilson without also mentioning Sly Stone, who died this week at the same age, 82, also a massive drug casualty. Actually, both of these guys, it's kind of remarkable how long they survived, given how many drugs that they did. But yeah, Sly Stone, his career really kind of took off just as Brian Wilson's had peaked. He was the frontman of Sly and the Family Stone, really birthed a lot of the funk that would get very big in the 70s. I would highly recommend his album Stand if you're looking for a place to start. But R.I.P. Brian Wilson and Sly Stone.
And we shouldn't forget that other musical superstar, Brett Bayer,
who
died this week on social media when his rap for the Sugar Hill Gang. Can we play a bit here,
yes.
Rocky? I'll just talk over the top of it, I think. I don't think it's copyrighted.
And you know what? Sly Stone made that possible.
For those who are listening and not watching, you need to imagine Brett Bayer in a white top and white chinos when he's doing that.
And he's crouching at an angle that you usually associate with intestinal distress.
Yeah, I think he might be on all of Brian Wilson's drugs. All at once. God, you know what I like about this? Number one.
Yeah, the keyboardist behind him keeps looking at his phone.
I can't believe the keyboardist is doing anything.
Yeah.
I like the fact that next time one of my daughters says that I'm embarrassing Dad, I can just play that and just go, see? It gets worse.
Yeah, but that is a bit like the Reductio ad Hitlerum argument, isn't it?
It's one of the very few times that comparing someone to Hitler is not over the top.
Yeah. It's the Reductio ad Hitlerum of embarrassing Dad-ness.
Anyway, so that's Rapper's Delight. Not so delightful.
But, you know, he has actually performed that with the Sugar Hill Gang.
What?
While dressed in a Christmas outfit. Lockie, put it up.
But
2016.
Is this his go-to? He just does
it
Rapper's
must be.
Delight
2016, this was celebrating the 10th anniversary of his show. I don't know why the Sugar Hill Gang agreed to this.
Are they like the less successful kind of Kid Rock? Is that what this is?
Look, I think a lot of these vintage rap acts are showing up in increasingly desperate locations these days. Like there was a crypto conference in Las Vegas recently, which I read about on Defector, where Bone Thugs in Harmony did First of the Month.
Wow.
In front of all these completely uninterested crypto investors.
I want to hear Brett Bayer do Bone Thugs in Harmony. Crossroads. What am I grateful for, though, apart from Brett Bayer?
Yeah.
I'm grateful for, it is a bit random, international criminal court judges. Bit random. They're not in the news. If you're wondering if this is going to a news story, no, it's not. But I was on a thread and I was just reading about the kinds of sanctions these guys deal with.
Yeah.
Like just routinely. Basically, if you involve America or Israel in anything as an international criminal court judge, you're done. Like it doesn't matter if you got the law on your side. It doesn't matter if you got the facts on your side. It doesn't matter. If you're going to be an international criminal court judge, you're going to get arrested every time you go to America. I know that doesn't narrow it down much these days, but that's a start. All your bank accounts are going to get frozen. You're going to get death threats. You're going to have to go into hiding. Your email account will get shut down by Microsoft. What's Bill Gates? I don't understand why he's going to involve himself in this, but life is not good if you're an ICC judge.
No.
It really sucks. And there aren't a lot of fast cars, drugs, and chicks involved either. Life is not good. There are no benefits to being an ICC judge. and just lots of detriments. And they're doing it because presumably they care about the rule of law.
Yeah.
So good on them. So I like, you don't get much, so at least you can get my gratitude. I'm grateful to you guys.
Yeah.
Stay strong.
I agree.
I mean, look, and I'm not saying that I agree with everything they do or whatever, but just even no matter how much you disagree with them, surely you can let them live. Apparently, there's too much to ask. Anyway,
a high bar there. Yes.
Before we move on to the updates, I just want to just note once again, I'm not doing correspondences yet. They're coming. They're coming. Don't worry, they're coming. But not today.
Okay.
I will read the emails. So I did see in the comments a lot of talk about the sound quality in the last one. I just wanted to note, and by the way, Lockie's coming eventually as well. We're building this new form. But for people going, where's Lockie? Did you know that Lockie? A lot of people in the comments are asking about. Yeah,
I'm here.
There he is. I don't know if he's on the mic, but he is here. Yeah, like just on behalf of Lockie, there was apparently a gate, like a sound gate got shut. So it was like on Richie's. Opened. A sound gate got opened. So you can call
the
that,
gate to hell.
I was going to say you can call that the gate if you like. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you just don't realise till afterwards. But we're onto it. Don't worry, it's fixed. Let's deal with updates. At which point in time, Lockie, doing it for the people who are watching. Oh my God, we got graphics behind us now. We have entered the 80s. That's fantastic. Okay, I've got a few updates to begin with. You know, everyone knows what the first update's going to be, surely. Elon Musk. He tweets out yesterday afternoon while I'm prepping this podcast, so of course it's going to go in here, the following regretful tweet. I regret some of my posts about President Trump last week. They went too far. I can't imagine which ones he's talking about. And he's also been retweeting Trump again during the LA stuff. Like he's like all the immigration stuff. He loves that. He loves violence. He loves cops shooting hippies. This is all down his alley. So there's lots of emojis and retweets. He's back. He's trying to be back in the fold. I don't know if Trump's taking him or not, but he's trying to be back in the fold. Do you have any comments? What have we learned?
Well,
what have we learned
it's
Musk?
heartwarming that at the age of 50 whatever, the world's richest man has finally learnt that calling people pedos as a first resort isn't always the best thing to do online.
Yeah.
Now, you will remember, not the first time he's done this. When that Thai cave flooded, trapping a junior soccer team inside, you might remember the story.
I do remember the story.
He wanted to send his own submersible in to rescue them. He was very excited about turning this cave tragedy into a potential promotional opportunity for one of his companies. But instead, some diver who was qualified selfishly went and rescued all of the kids himself with the cooperation of the Thai government. How did Musk react to that? By calling him a pedo. So not the first time that he has ill-advisedly done this.
But the first time he's regretted it.
The first time he's regretted it. He still doesn't regret it the first time around. Now, I assume that that's one of the tweets he's referring to. There are some stories coming out that J.D. Vance stepped in to mediate.
Oh, yeah?
That there was a conversation.
Yeah.
But I suspect the mediation was something along the lines of, so here are the contracts that Trump has threatened to suspend. Here's how you get yourself out from underneath that. Given when we know how much Trump loves symbolic victories, especially symbolic victories that involve groveling, that involve reinforcement of the status hierarchy.
Yeah.
This, I suspect, is what Musk has done. I suspect that this is what gets Musk out from under the threats to his billions of dollars worth of government contracts. It's issuing this groveling apology while at the same time Trump is telling Miranda Devine, I might reconcile with him one day. I don't know. I don't think about him very much. Like as if Trump does. As if Trump is not thinking about this all the time. But anyway, we've had the little piece of theatre where it's very clear going back to the young ones, who is the Vivian and who is the Rick in this relationship. Yep, that's been reestablished. And as a result, I suspect that things are going to get back to normal.
I'm sure they will. I have two things to add. The first thing is I'm going to dispute you on one critical point.
What's that?
That Musk's first insult to someone is that they're a pedophile. I don't think that's true. It might be his second insult. His first insult we also saw during this week. I don't know if he regrets these ones. But his first, like when Steve Bannon had a go at him, and Steve Bannon said that Trump should that very night seize SpaceX from Elon Musk and then deport him.
Yes.
Because he said, because I know he's an illegal immigrant. That's what Bannon said. Elon Musk responded not once, but 3 times with Bannon is peak retard. 3 times. 3 times in the one night. So that is his go-to insult. And then he said communist. Bannon is a communist retard as well.
It's like
so that's his word.
The development really just was frozen at the age of 14.
14? I think I was a bit more mature than that when I was 14. I'm going 9. The second thing I want to say is something I've been wondering. And I was going to ask Richie this last week, but I didn't have an answer. But then I read the answer. I was going to ask Richie when we were talking about this. We ran out of time. Why is this whole Musk-Trump thing so annoying? Because I really found it annoying. And then I read someone who wrote a whole article about why it's so annoying.
Right.
And they were absolutely right. It's Nick Catoggio, who writes The Dispatch. He's one of my favourite writers.
Okay.
Melina likes him a lot too. So if you like me and Melina, you might want to look up Nick Catoggio. You have to pay for him, unfortunately. But his theory is, and I think it's right, is that it's the contrast between the very, very serious times that we're in and the very, very serious context that these guys are fighting in.
Yes.
And the extreme and the very serious problems we're talking about, and the very, very unserious nature of both those people and the way they conduct themselves.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and like it's like for instance, Musk's entire budget cutting effort has been like that's very serious results. People literally dying of AIDS and cancer and stuff, but the actual budget cutting effort itself, deeply unserious.
Yes.
As a contrast to the effects.
Yeah.
The entire bill, the entire big beautiful bill.
Yeah, the fact that it's called One Big Beautiful Bill.
Yes, and it as economic policy is deeply, deeply unserious with extremely serious impacts.
Yes.
Their intellectual engagement with the issues created by this scenario is deeply unserious. And this whole thing might be what's going to cause America to march over a very, very serious economic cliff if the bond vigilantes go crazy. And while that's happening, Musk and Trump are scratching each other's eyes out on social media in a deeply, deeply unserious way. And it all happened on the anniversary of D-Day, reminding everyone that world leaders didn't used to be like this.
Yes.
It's very, very annoying.
Well, Jack Posobiec had a different interpretation.
Yeah, yes.
He said, well, clearly, some of you have never seen, what was it, 2 high agency males going at it.
The phallocentric way.
This is phallocentric communication rather than gynocentric communication.
Yes, we did play that one on the extra. Thanks, Jack. Yep. Anyway, okay, that's enough of that one. Unless you have something else to add about Musk?
No.
I feel like we've all said enough about Musk.
I think we have.
Trade update, Dave. Now, a couple of things this week. First of all, we learned a bit about deals, Dave.
Yes.
Remember, July 9 is deals, Day.
Yes.
That's the end of 90 deals in 90 days.
Oh, hang on. That date is now in the past.
Not
sorry.
July. 9th of
No.
July. No. Not 9th of June.
Okay.
9th of July. They've got 4 weeks left.
Oh.
Don't worry. You have the opportunity to say that, and there will still be no deals.
I was like, what have I missed?
No.
Okay.
No, that's coming, mate. Four more weeks.
Okay.
Still no more deals announced, despite every single week we hear about lots of deals almost done. This week we heard about the struggles to make a deal with Japan. And apparently one of the biggest impediments have you heard this story?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the biggest impediments was the extreme incompetence and division from the US negotiators. In particular, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and US Trade Rep Jamison Greer. They're kind of bringing the Three Stooges energy to the negotiation because they can't agree amongst themselves what they're trying to do. Quote, at one point, the three cabinet officials put the talks with the Japanese side on hold and began debating right in front of them, said one source. It's made harder because their responsibilities all overlap with each other, so it's never clear who's in charge. Now, the next paragraph, I'm just going to quote directly from Nikkei Asia, which is where I read the story. In addition to the lack of unity amongst Bessent, Lutnick and Greer, Tokyo is also concerned about the insufficient coordination between cabinet officials and working level staff. Tariff negotiations typically involve technical issues being hashed out at the working level, the details being set at the cabinet level, and then a final agreement being reached by national leaders. In the current talks, the three tiers, this quote, the three tiers in the US, the working level, cabinet officials, and the president, are disjointed, and it appears that information is not being shared with each other, said a senior Japanese economic official. The Japanese side frequently need to repeat the same things at the working and cabinet level talks, the official added, and Trump's intentions are unclear. You don't say. So that might be one of the reasons why the deals aren't getting made at the moment, Dave. Do you have anything to add on that before we go into the next part of this?
I mean, it's absurd to think that you can do trade deals this quickly. And the language that Trump keeps using, it's the language of real estate. Like, give me your best and final offer. It's the language of negotiations over a single thing, like over the price of a building or something like that. Trade deals are very, very complicated and multifaceted.
Yes.
Especially when Trump indicates a constant willingness to make trade deals about other things as well as trade. Yeah. So countries don't want to make hasty trade deals. No. Given that trade deals, when they're done properly, are around for a long time. They're around through many different governments. So I imagine that the countries that are doing them want to try to reach deals that they think are really actually based on the underlying interests of both countries, things that will persist for a long time. I can understand why a lot of countries are really just balking at the moment, as well as the stuff that they don't even know about the legal status of the tariffs that are being used as the major bargaining chip. Yeah, all of that aside, then you combine the incompetence of all of these people who have never done anything like this before and don't know how it works, and you're not going to get deals being done.
No, you won't. The next, there's three bits of this update. The second bit is involving tariff success. While all these deals are being hammered out, Dave, the latest unemployment figures came out. The rate was unchanged at 4.2%. 139,000 new jobs, reasonable number.
Yep.
The employment population ratio did fall from 60% to 59.7%, but on the positive, that's all right. On the positive, hourly wages rose 0.4% for the month. That's positive.
Yep.
Not a bell ringer, but look, it's fine. Certainly good enough for Trump to try to gaslight us about it. A tweet in all caps. America is hot! 6 months ago it was cold as ice. Border is closed. Prices are down. Wages are up. Now, I bring this up for one reason only. After months and months of wonder tariffs.
Yes.
Manufacturing jobs fell by 8,000. And Trump's Labor Secretary was really struggling to spin this on Fox News. Now, the anchor, I want to give him credit. I want to say his name so you know. I'll give him credit. Was Stuart Varney. He did not let this go, and this is how it went.
Now, 8,000 manufacturing jobs were lost in May. That's not what you wanted to see.
Well, we're certainly holding steady, and under the Trump administration, manufacturing jobs are still up over what the last administration under Biden had. The focus of my America at Work tour is to increase those manufacturing jobs, and we'll continue to stay laser focused on that as the president continues to double down on how important this is to the American economy.
But how come we're losing 8,000 manufacturing jobs in May, and when there's a big push to bring manufacturing jobs back to America, how come we're losing those jobs?
Well, we're certainly holding steady, and as we increase construction jobs, as we increase healthcare jobs, and again, that focus on building those manufacturing plants, it will take some time. The president has done a wonderful job in negotiating the level playing field. As far as the tariff discussions have gone, but those onshoring of those jobs, we're seeing tens of trillions of dollars being reinvested here in the United States. And I'll continue to focus on that skilled workforce as those manufacturing jobs continue to grow.
Continue to grow. We've noticed the number.
Yeah. Well, look, the magnitude is getting bigger.
It's true. Anyway, I found it quite funny. But the big news this week, Dave.
Yes.
This is the one that you're going to weigh in, and I'm sure involved China. Finally, after months of pretending that Z was really keen to call Trump, they actually did speak on the phone.
They did.
Those crazy kids. China's statement came out immediately, like seconds after the call. Mm-hmm. President Trump spoke with Xi Jinping at the US president's request. They were very, very keen to get that little bit out. They're like children, aren't they?
They really are.
Trump's take was, I just concluded a very good phone call with President Xi of China discussing some of the intricacies of our recently made and agreed to trade deal. The call lasted approximately 1.5 hours and resulted in a very positive conclusion for both countries. There should no longer be any questions respecting the complexity of rare earth products. That's the bit. Our respective teams will be meeting shortly at a location to be determined. We'll be represented by Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and United States Trade Representative Ambassador Jamison Greer. What could go wrong with those guys? Yeah, they got their rare earths from the sounds of things. Maybe.
Yeah, they thought they had them back in May. Yeah. Okay, once again, let's just get clarify what they mean by trade deal here. What has been achieved here is both countries have removed the restrictions that they put on the other country last month.
Yeah.
That's it. Yes.
Actually, it's worse than that.
From the US point of view, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay, so all that China has done is restore access to the rare earths that they cut off last month.
Yes.
What the US has done is to actually lift prohibitions on defense-related technologies.
Let me play a clip.
Yep.
Let me play a clip because a couple of days later,
yes,
after that, and everyone thought, oh, that's nice.
Yep.
We heard a very interesting detail, which you're about to tell us about.
Yes, yeah.
From the White House National Economic Council Director, Kevin Hassett. He went on CNBC to boast about this great deal. And I think he said more than he was supposed to.
Oh, no!
So let's just listen.
So I expect it to be a short meeting with a big, strong handshake, and we'll see. But that's what we're expecting.
And then back to the negotiating table for some of the other things? Or this was the main
other things.
Was this the main sticking point? It was?
Yeah, this was a very significant sticking point because China controls, as you know, something like 90% of the rare earths and the magnets, and if they're slow rolling, sending those to the U.S. because of some licensing deal that they set up, then it could potentially disrupt production for some U.S. companies that rely on those things. And there are enough of those, like for example, auto companies, that President Trump took it very seriously, called President Xi and said we gotta get the stuff coming out faster, and President Xi agreed.
Kevin, the alternative, China's perspective on that is that the import controls on semiconductors are equally problematic for Chinese companies that rely on these things. Is that going to be kind of an offset to say, okay, we'll get back on board, we'll let up on the rare earth minerals if you will go ahead and say the same thing on the semiconductors? Is that the trade-off?
Correct. Yeah, correct. So our expectation is that after the handshake, then immediately after the handshake, any export controls from the U.S. will be eased, and the rare earths will be released in volume, and then we can go back to negotiating smaller matters.
But I thought those were for security issues. We were worried about them using in military things. Is there some way to control against that and make sure that that doesn't happen?
Well, it depends. Like the very, very high-end NVIDIA stuff is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about possible export controls on other semiconductors, which are also very important to them.
Dave, take it away.
Yeah, so those controls have been in place since the Biden administration. This was part of the Biden strategy of the small yard and the high fence.
Yeah.
In other words, there were going to be certain technologies that China was just not supposed to get access to in order to maintain the US security advantage. That was a major part of American strategy in relation to competition with China. It sounds like it from what our man JG was just saying. That was JG, wasn't
Kevin
it?
Hassett.
Oh, that was Kevin Hassett.
Yeah.
From JG's Jamison Greer / Geoffrey Goldberg. From what our man Kevin Hassett was saying, it sounds like the US has just given that away in order to secure the critical minerals. And a month ago, they had access to the critical minerals without having to give that away.
Yes.
So this is the negotiating genius we are looking at in the Trump administration here. Yeah. Now, why did China slow walk the critical minerals? It was because Marco Rubio was out there saying, we're going to target Chinese students. We're going to revoke the visas of Chinese students, as well as and particularly ones who have any connection to the Communist Party. What was the other issue that there was? There was some other thing, but
another one,
that was the one that got them really upset. Yeah. So anyway, the end result of that is that they've basically gone back to where they were a month ago, but the US has torn down the high fence surrounding the small yard of technologies.
And they are literally worse off than they were before the trade war.
Yes. Yeah. Worse off than they were before Trump got elected.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Which is actually something you predicted would happen.
Absolutely.
About 2 months ago.
Yes.
So, hat tip.
Yeah.
While you're talking, you might as well keep on going. Lockie, get your graphic ready, mate. We're going to talk about Iran negotiations.
Oh, okay.
Negotiations.
Actually, before we do that,
Yes.
I've got a trivia
Oh,
question.
please, yes.
for
Perfect
you.
time.
Okay. This one is about naval hardware.
Naval hardware.
The last US battleship ever commissioned was the USS Missouri, which was built in 1944. And it stayed in service in one form or another all the way through to 1992. Now, this battleship is most famous for two things. What are they?
Missouri. Now, was the Missouri one of the ships that got bombed in Pearl Harbor, but it kept going?
It was not. No.
It was not.
No, because the Missouri was built in 1944.
Oh, I'm an idiot. He's just said 944. That's right.
Okay, the first thing, it did happen in World War II.
Yeah.
It was a very significant location. This was where the Japanese military leadership surrendered to the United States.
Oh, okay.
That ceremony happened on the deck of the battleship Missouri. But something equally significant happened many decades later.
Oh, no. This is mission accomplished.
No.
Damn it. Ah.
No.
I thought I had that for sure.
Nope. Lockie, do you want to show us what it was?
Share. Honestly,
Yes.
how fast was I on that?
Yes.
That took me half a second.
Yeah.
Of course.
That's right about there. That's where the Japanese were surrendering during the Second World War. If you're looking at that and wondering, well, the US Navy must have agreed to that. Why would they ever agree to that? You've got to remember what kind of recruiting gimmicks the US Armed Forces were resorting to in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like one of them was Top Gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was another one.
Yeah. Post-Vietnam period.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. The military industrial music video complex.
Yeah, gaffer tape, least of their concerns. Absolutely. By the way, while we're doing the trivia thing,
Yes.
let me just say,
Yes.
I mean, hat tip as well for everyone out there who felt good about, I mean, you probably just felt good again. They gave a stupid answer to that trivia question. But for all the people who got Maine right
Yes.
last week, seemed everyone got Maine right except for me, and they felt great about the fact they got it right and I got it wrong. So I hope you do feel good about that. I feel terrible. So
You don't need to feel terrible, Chaz.
I had rubbed in. Even our supervisor, who's not even an American politics guy.
He knew it, did he?
The supervisor knew it as well. He came right up to me and said, "Hey, I knew that trivia question."
Oh, maybe he just knows a few things about the curvature of the Earth.
That must be his specialty. Dave. Now,
yes.
let's talk about Iran.
Okay.
Preferably without a trivia question.
Okay. Yes. Yep. I want to start this by going back to the original agreement that Trump shredded, because it's still technically in place.
This is the Obama deal.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So this is called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, but it's, in short, usually known as the Iran nuclear deal. So we'll refer to it as the Iran nuclear deal from now on.
Sure.
So this was negotiated in 2015. It took 2 years to negotiate it. It was not just the US and Iran, even though it's often referred to as this bilateral deal. It wasn't just the US and Iran. This is one of the critical aspects of it. Other parties to it were Russia, China, the UK, France, Germany, and the European Union.
Yep.
Right. So there was a lot of buy-in in this agreement. Now, the most important technical details of it were, so Iran by this point had quite a lot of enriched uranium. Not enriched to the point of being able to make a nuclear weapon, so that's like 90%. They had uranium that was enriched to about 20%.
Yep.
But they clearly had the capacity to enrich a lot more.
Yep.
That gave them significant bargaining leverage. The bargaining leverage that the other powers had were crippling sanctions being leveled against Iran. Okay, and this all began about a decade earlier.
Yes.
Okay, so the agreement was Iran would dilute most of its enriched stockpile down to a level of 3.75%.
Yes.
3.75%. I think you need 3.67% to make nuclear power. Okay, so and overall they reduced that stockpile a lot. They put a lot of their centrifuges into storage. But the whole idea was this was temporary. I mean, temporary on a scale of 15 years.
15 years, yeah.
But still temporary, yes.
Two-thirds of the centrifuges.
Yes.
Dismantling 2/3 of the centrifuges and surrendering all its low and medium enrichment uranium.
Yes. There was one facility that they were allowed to develop. They were allowed to develop their research capacities. The whole way that this worked was Iran was not going to give up its nuclear capacities. But for 15 years, it was going to submit to a regime where it would be impossible to make a nuclear weapon.
Unless they had a covert program.
Going on.
Which they did.
But, well, the way that the parties to it dealt with that was they had a very rigorous inspections regime. Like Iran allowed a lot of surveillance equipment to be installed in their nuclear facilities. It was going to be available to inspectors 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And also, it wasn't just those facilities they had access to. They had access to the complete Iranian nuclear supply chain. This is why, incidentally, the Israeli military was in favour of this deal. The Israeli government was not, but the Israeli military was in favour of this deal. 10 years ago, I actually went to the Limud Oz Festival of Jewish Ideas at UNSW. I was invited to have an argument with Ruthie Bloom about this.
Okay.
Ruthie Bloom, the daughter of Norman Podhoretz. And we actually got on very well, but we very much disagreed about this issue. Like, I was always a big proponent of this deal. And I would say before that debate, about 80% of the audience disagreed with me. Probably about 79% of them disagreed with me afterwards. I'd say I reached 1%. Yeah. But anyway, I was always a major proponent of this deal because I felt that it made the symbolic concessions that Iran wanted and that Iran needed, while, at least in the medium term, contributing to nuclear non-proliferation.
Sure.
Now, certainly the Israeli government was very opposed to it because their position is that all of Iran's nuclear capacity needs to be destroyed. I can understand where they're coming from with that. But I can also understand why not only Iran, but why most other countries in the region don't accept that reasoning, given that Israel has a nuclear arsenal of its own.
Of course.
The important thing, I think, that came out in those negotiations is very important to keep in mind is for Iran, this isn't just about either offensive or defensive capabilities. This is about sovereignty.
Yes.
It sees the ability to enrich uranium, the ability to generate nuclear power, and the ability to potentially develop a nuclear weapon if it feels threatened. It sees all of these things as important elements of the sovereignty that are due to it as a major Islamic power. And there's this almost kind of mystical element around what the ability to have a nuclear program means to the Iranians. Yeah. Like you would see these ceremonies with people dressed in blue lab coats, like holding up these rods, which were obviously fake, but it was all to symbolize the the importance of it. Because I mean, this is a program that they developed themselves with their own scientists. There was a lot of symbolic importance to them, and it's about sovereignty.
Okay.
Right. It is not just about the ability to have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
I think that's something that often gets lost from view, and it's something that makes negotiations a lot more difficult when you don't know what it is the Iranians actually want.
I've got some quotes coming up to back that up.
Okay.
But you keep going.
Now, why did this deal fall apart? Well, it was foreshadowed that it was going to fall apart when Tom Cotton led 47 Republican senators in writing a letter to the Iranian leadership saying, you shouldn't sign this deal because we're just going to reverse it as soon as we get a chance. The deal, by the way, it was not classified by the State Department as either a treaty, which would have needed congressional approval, or as an executive action. It was actually classified as a non-binding political agreement. But Obama did urge Congress to get behind it. Republicans said, no, that is not going to happen. So as soon as Trump got to power, this was something that Republicans wanted him to dismantle. He didn't dismantle it in his first year, but in the second year, he unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. Now, I stress, the Iran nuclear deal was still in place. And when Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, his own intelligence agencies were telling him it was working, right? Iran was not violating it. The IAEA didn't find any violations going on.
They have since, though, haven't they?
They have since, after the US withdrew.
No, but I think that they have since found secret labs that were there before, but they just didn't know they were there before.
I thought the story was they were there from before the deal, but they said Iran didn't disclose them.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible.
There was something that they were supposed to disclose, but didn't.
No,
that was the official reason that Trump gave for. So it wasn't something Iran was doing currently. It was they'd had a program in the past that they hadn't declared. Yeah. That was the reason that he gave, even though his own intelligence agency was saying this inspections regime is working.
Sure.
So not surprisingly, when the US withdrew, Iran started enriching uranium.
They did.
Again. And they now have uranium that is enriched to the level of 50%, I think, or above 50%.
I think they're above.
Yeah. 60%?
Yeah, I think they're pretty high.
Yeah. Now, because for so many years we hear all these estimations about how far away is Iran from making a weapon. You always hear, like, it's a few weeks, it's a few days. I don't think anyone really knows. But they're certainly closer than they used to be.
Sure.
To making a weapon. And at this point, whatever is left of the Iran nuclear deal is actually falling apart. Like now the other parties to it are threatening to put sanctions in place. Yeah. So because Iran has been blatantly enriching uranium so much.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the context in which Trump is negotiating his new nuclear deal with Iran. And Iran is not surprisingly playing hardball.
They are.
So, two things. First of all, I think that Trump is sincere in his desire to get a deal, just as he was sincere in his desire to dismantle it last time around. No, you can tell he wants his legacy to be Trump the deal maker, as opposed to Trump the deal announcer, which is what he is at the moment. And so he does want to make a deal. But I think also he's probably very conscious of not wanting to get exactly the same deal that Barack Obama got and having everybody pointing that out all the time.
Yes.
Now, at the moment, in my view, he would be lucky to get exactly the same deal that Barack Obama got because Iran's views on a lot of things have changed since then. Among other things, they have endured a lot of extremely heavy sanctions. They have developed ways around those sanctions. The sanctions don't have the same leverage that they used to against Iran. Now, of course, it wants those sanctions removed, but they have signalled very credibly that they are prepared to keep going with their nuclear program with those sanctions on. Now, the big sticking point is, will Iran be allowed to enrich uranium on Iranian soil?
Yes.
Okay, so Iran has made it very clear that this is their red line. They will not give up the ability to enrich uranium on Iranian soil. Sorry, I know I'm going to get Iranian and uranium confused.
Sure. Let me just say that Iran have explicitly said, as part of these negotiations, I think they've had 5 rounds so far of negotiations, they've explicitly said several times that they would commit to signing a deal tomorrow, which stipulated they never make nuclear weapons. They get rid of their stockpiles of highly enriched uranium, which can be weaponized. They agree to enrich uranium only to the lower levels needed for civilian use. That's Obama deal levels. And allow international inspectors to supervise the process.
Also original deal.
In exchange for the immediate lifting of all economic sanctions on Iran. They said they will sign that deal tomorrow. But you'll note that they insist on retaining the right to enrich their own uranium. That's their absolute red line.
Also a part of the original deal that they had.
And I should also say that the American Congress have seen this, the Republicans in Congress have seen this coming from a mile away. Sorry, the Republicans and Chuck Schumer in Congress, because he's effectively a Republican for this and only this issue. And, they've seen this coming a mile away, and they signed an open letter with 177 signatures out of the 220 Republicans saying that the deal must dismantle Iran's nuclear program and the regime must permanently give up any capacity for enrichment. So they're trying to put pressure on Trump to respect that as well.
Now, if you're wondering, well, what kind of deal is that? What does Iran get out of it? The proposal that the US negotiators came up with was the idea of having a regional consortium of nuclear power. So that Iran would actually have access to nuclear power, to the fuel that could be used for nuclear power, along with any other country in the regional consortium that wanted it, but that it could not be enriched on Iranian soil. I think they were looking at Saudi Arabia as a potential location. There was talk for a while of maybe if we put it in these islands in the Persian Gulf, which are technically Iranian territory, but not on the Iranian mainland. But no. Nobody is fooled by that shit. So at the moment, what it looks like is the Iranian red line is we must be allowed to enrich uranium on our own soil. The American red line is, in Trump's words, no enrichment by Iran anywhere ever.
Permanently. I believe there was some talk, not an official offer, but there's some rumors that were disturbing Republicans in Congress, suggesting that the Trump administration was prepared to do a temporary deal where they temporarily can go Obama style for 6 months. And then they permanently stop.
Right.
but Iran just said no. By the way, I just when I was looking for something just now, I noticed my figures, which I should have noticed before when you were asking about the percentage with uranium. Iran's got 408 kilos of uranium enriched to 60%. And that is an increase of 133 kilos or 50%
Yes.
since February.
Yep.
And that's and that 60% obviously can get easily converted to 90%. If it is, they have enough uranium for 9 nuclear bombs.
Yep.
So that's where they're at the moment.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, so there's your standoff. On
Yes. Okay, so then the question is who's holding the cards and what happens if a deal is not reached?
Just before you say that,
Yep.
can I just throw in a little bit of a cat amongst the pigeons, which is Iran recently have, for whatever reason, maybe this suggests they think they're holding the cards, have decided to go bad cop.
Yes.
And they've been, shall we say, less than diplomatic. First of all, the foreign minister said, the messaging we and the world continue to receive from America is confusing and contradictory. Mark my words, there is no scenario in which Iran abandons its hard-earned right to enrichment for peaceful purposes. We always welcome dialogue based on mutual respect and always reject any diktat. That's insinuating what you're saying before about sovereignty.
Yes.
And then the foreign minister a couple of days later said, we are ready for a serious conversation to achieve a solution that will forever ensure that outcome. Enrichment in Iran, however, will continue with or without a deal. And then in a televised speech, the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said, the first word of the US is that Iran should not have a nuclear industry and should rely on the United States. Our response to the US nonsense is clear. They cannot do a damn thing in this matter. The rude and arrogant leaders of America repeatedly demand that we should not have a nuclear program. Who are you to decide whether Iran should have an enrichment? Why are you interfering? Whether Iran enriches uranium or not, what does it have to do with you? Who are you?
Who are you?
And then the same day, the Iran foreign minister came back with a tweet. There is no scenario in which we will give up on the patriots who made our dream come true. No enrichment, no deal, no nuclear weapons. We have a deal.
Yes.
So there we go.
So there's a few things worth paying attention to there. And I mean, as I've mentioned before, I'm currently working on this project on the satanic versus fatwa crisis. So I've read a lot of Iranian undiplomatic language over the years in translation, and that is some of the finest examples. Yes, but the dreams our heroes and patriots made come true, right? It's this mystical, patriotic symbolism around nuclear weapons, which is all so closely linked to this conception of sovereignty. And that is signaling, if necessary, we will endure more economic hardship. The fact that Ayatollah Khamenei is getting directly involved this time is significant. He was not directly involved in the Iran nuclear deal talks. He never actually approved the Iran nuclear deal. He just let it happen. Because even though he's the Supreme Leader doesn't weigh in on every issue. But he is actually really driving it now. Not only is he the one who gave the green light to negotiations, he's the one who is laying down the red lines. And what that means is there's in the past, often the US and other countries, when they've been negotiating with Iran, they've been able to take advantage of political disunity. Because Iran is not a monolithic political system. There are lots of different components to the Iranian government. Not only do you have that theocratic Council of Guardians, or not really theocratic, but, this pseudo-theocratic Council of Guardians at the top, you've also got a democratically elected parliament. You've also got a president with their cabinet. And all these different forces pull in all these different directions. You've got hardliners, you've got moderates. But at the moment, it's very difficult to find any kind of fault line to seize on. Whereas often in the past, this has taken place in the context of power struggles going on with Iran, of elections coming up where you might expect a leadership change. That was the one of the significant things about the 2015 deal was it came up in this relatively narrow window where you had a president who was committed to doing it while Khamenei wasn't saying anything. So, but this time around, Iran seems really unified. Seems. You can never tell, but seems a lot more unified than it has been. So that makes it a lot harder for the US, especially considering there is significant dissidents within the president's own party on this. And it is public. Okay, so
and you got Netanyahu there, who
yes.
just wants to attack
Right.
at all times.
Yeah, so the basic divide is between Republicans who want to go the Netanyahu route, and this includes Mark Levin, who maybe he's not a household name on the order of Tucker Carlson, but he was a huge deal like 20 years ago. Still has quite a lot of influence in conservative circles, can still have dinner with Trump when he wants to, and has recently had dinner with Trump when he wants to. So, yeah, you've got people like him. You've got a lot of the Senate Republicans take this line. They don't want any kind of deal with Iran at all, really. They want the destruction of Iran's nuclear capabilities. They want the US to back Israel in doing this.
Yes.
Most of them probably don't want the US to do it directly, but they want the US to back Israel in doing this. And Netanyahu is saying at the moment, this is the window to do it, because they've never really been that worried about direct retaliation from Iran. What they get worried about is retaliation from Iran's proxies, i.e. Hamas and Hezbollah. At the moment, they feel that Hamas and Hezbollah are so weakened that now is the time to proceed militarily against Iran with complete impunity.
And they've taken out all of Iran's anti-aircraft missiles as well from earlier in the year.
Yeah, they have, although there are some who argue that Iran's rebuilt a lot of that, and a mission like that would be a lot more dangerous than it is. Now, I don't know enough about Israel's capacities to know whether Israel can actually do it. I know it would be hard because the facilities that they're talking about are buried a long way underground, but that's certainly the Netanyahu option. Although I think Netanyahu would prefer for the US to do it rather than for Israel to do it. But Trump himself seems to have been consistently turning away from this Israeli destruction option. I think this is, visible to everyone. This is cause of an increasing rift between him and Netanyahu. A lot of the people who are closest to him, like J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson, are really backing the diplomatic effort. They're particularly defending Steve Witkoff from everybody who's attacking him. And there are a lot of people who are attacking Steve Witkoff over this. No, they're really backing the diplomatic effort, Marco Rubio as well. And they're saying we don't want to be dragged into another Middle Eastern war. That's the major thing that they're afraid of, is Trump essentially having his own Iraq. Yeah. So what is Trump saying? Well, Trump has, as is his wont, veered wildly between optimism and pessimism about a deal. There have been periods where he's been very optimistic. He's been in we're just weeks away from getting a deal. He was talking very enthusiastically about the inspections regime he was imagining, where he was saying, we can come in whenever we want, we can take whatever we want, we can blow up whatever we want. We don't kill anyone, but we can blow up whatever we want. So that was how he was imagining inspections happening. There have been moments where Witkoff has suggested, maybe we could allow some kind of low-level enrichment. In fact, there was one point where he was proposing like almost exactly what had been under the Obama deal, but quickly, I think someone must have pointed that out to him, and he backtracked pretty quickly. Now, Trump is talking a lot more pessimistically about it, and I'm talking about in the last 48 hours, things that he's been saying. He's been saying it's looking like it's very hard. The Iranians are requesting some very unreasonable things. They're just not doing the things that they need to do, i.e. committing to never enriching uranium. And today, so I don't know if you've seen this might just be a bit of theatre. The State Department has told US State Department staff in Iraq that they can leave.
Oh.
Now, what they're definitely trying to signal with that is military action could be imminent, because what Iran has been saying over the last 48 hours is, you strike us, we will strike US bases all over the region.
Right.
They're all in reach. We will strike them all over the region. Right. And the nearest ones are obviously in Iraq.
And by the way, this entire period they've been negotiating, America's had a whole bunch of bombers on an island just off Iran.
Yes.
just hanging there.
Yes. And so, Trump, I do think, actually, that if Iran gets bombed, it's more likely it would be by the US than by Israel. I think Trump, he keeps talking about the US would do it itself. So, yeah.
What's your bet?
I don't know. No, I've got no idea.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it could be Israel bombing, could be American bombing, or Trump could back down. Never underestimate Trump's ability to back down. Maybe the Iranians have just got to find what is the symbolic victory that Trump needs out of this. The problem is the Iranians are also very big on symbolic victories.
Yeah.
The symbolic victories that they will not give away. They are very clear on what they're not going to give away. They're very clear about what they're prepared to endure. And certainly they seem to be showing a lot more credible resolve at the moment than the US is. So that is my read on how the negotiations are going.
Thank you very much, Dave. Okay, let's head towards LA.
Okay.
I am going to do a little bit of intro and then we'll get into it. Okay, so we saw probably about 2 weeks before the LA thing, maybe a week and a half. There was a story about Steve Miller and Kristi Noem hoping to set a new quota of the number of arrests per day. Because until then, there was about 1,000 arrests per day, which they sometimes hit, sometimes didn't hit.
Yep.
Now they wanted a minimum 3,000 arrests for ICE every single day.
And if you're wondering what is the fixation on these numbers, it's this. Trump wants to be known as the president who deported the most people in history.
Yes.
So far, he is trailing Barack Obama significantly.
So far, he's trailing Joe Biden.
He is trailing Joe Biden.
Yes.
He claimed
in deportation.
Yeah, he claimed a few weeks ago that he was on track to break Eisenhower's record. Eisenhower didn't set any kind of record. Yeah. It's Obama and Biden. That's why Obama was known as deporter-in-chief. Now, Trump is at a disadvantage here. The disadvantage is this. Most people, when they get deported at the border. They get deported when they've tried to cross over. Trump basically dismantled the asylum-seeking system.
Yes.
Which means people are not showing up to the border anymore.
That's spot on.
That's why he can't deport that many. Now,
So it's much harder.
you would think he might regard that as a victory. You'd think he might even try to explain that as a victory.
Yeah.
But no. He needs to be the one who deported the most people, even though it's way, way harder. This, by the way, if you're wondering why the CBP are being so much stricter at the airports now, this is because it's one of their KPIs as well, is to deport as many people as possible. Yeah. So this is all about meeting KPIs.
It is. It is. And now, just be clear, they're never going to hit that 3,000 quota.
No.
But Stephen Miller's going to put a rocket up them to try.
Yes. Yeah.
And what that means is a lot more non-criminals are going to get arrested. Because like Tom Homan is trying to arrest criminals.
Yes.
But Steve Miller is going, no, arrest everyone. So,
yeah, even Sebastian Gorka is like, well, the first priority has to be arresting criminals.
Yes. Pretty much everyone's on that page except for
when
Steve
Sebastian
Miller.
Gorka's the reasonable one in the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, Steve Miller is out there squawking like a duck.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he is. And to give you an example of what I'm talking about here, ICE just recently arrested 1,461 people in Massachusetts. Over a month that took as part of Operation Patriot. 54% had criminal convictions or charges. So they were going at 50-50, essentially. According to their own numbers, ICE made 394 wrongful arrests during the operation. I'm not talking about arrests of illegal immigrants who didn't have a criminal record. I mean arrests of people who weren't illegal immigrants.
Yes.
394. Now imagine when they go at 3,000 a day, how many wrongful arrests there will be. Anyway, so things are about to get pretty rough. The Washington Examiner had a story then about how ICE's 25 field officer directors were called into a meeting with also all the environmental removal operations chiefs, 25 special agents in charge of Homeland Security investigations, all of them called into a meeting for a scolding by Stephen Miller because they weren't hitting their numbers. One official told the Examiner, Miller came in there and eviscerated everyone. Quote, "You guys aren't doing a good job. You're horrible leaders." He just ripped into everybody. He had nothing positive to say about anybody. Shot morale down. Stephen Miller apparently is quoted as saying, "Why aren't you at Home Depot? Why aren't you at 7-Eleven?" Suggesting they're places to pick up immigrants. And to be fair, that might just sound like he's been racist. But to be fair, we have talked about in the podcast before, Home Depot is where you find illegal immigrants.
Yes.
They literally stay there to get work.
Yes.
So that is a place. If you want to not get criminals, but get hard-working neighbours,
Yes.
that's where you go to pick them up. And an ERO official apparently replied to that with saying we're targeting criminal illegal immigrants, not workers. And Miller said, "What do you mean you're going after criminals?" And then the source quotes then says, Miller got into a little bit of a pissing contest. And the official said, "That's what Tom Homan says every time he's on TV. We're going after criminals." And then Miller went off at him again. So that is the background before we start talking about what happened at Home Depot in LA.
Okay.
That all happened the week before. All right, so I'm going to start with how it started, and then I'll throw it to you, and then we'll just go back and forth. Right?
Yep.
Okay. So it started on the last Friday. There were minor protests against ICE for a few things. Oh, I don't want to say minor. They were decent-sized protests, but minor compared to what was to come. Number one, they were conducting workplace raids.
Yes.
ICE, including in LA's fashion district and including at Home Depot. These are incredibly unpopular generally because they're arresting non-criminals. Although the US attorney insisted that they did actually have judicial search warrants for these particular raids, but whatever, from a judge, that is. Two, second thing they were being protested about, ICE recently has been arresting people when they come to appointments to check in as required by law.
Yes.
So they're doing the right thing, these people, and they're following the law, and then they get arrested.
Yep.
And ICE apparently in LA, they've been keeping them in the basement of their building. And they don't have beds, and they sometimes don't have food and water. And that's getting out.
Yes.
And people are getting very upset about this. That these law-abiding non-citizens are getting thrown into a basement for however long. And so there was a small protest outside ICE's building on Friday about that.
Yep.
And that's when a union leader, David Huerta, was part of that. And he's quite popular and, as you'll see, quite harmless. He got arrested. You can see what it looks like here. I've got the arrest on camera. Huerta is the guy in the red check shirt, the portly man in the red check shirt who's about to get knocked on his butt.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
So that's it. So you can rewind if you want to see it again. There's not much to it. He gets pushed over by some ICE guy, and then they jump on him and arrest him. For those listening, he's been pushed over by an ICE guy who, of course, has his face covered, and he gets jumped on. We have no idea what happened there to cause that arrest, but it wasn't popular. After that, a few hundred protesters then headed off to the Federal Detention Center, where some of them, where Huerta apparently was taken.
Yep.
Some of them tried to break in. Some of them slashed tires. Some of them graffitied the building, defaced the building, tried to tear bits off the building.
Yep.
That was Friday. Okay, so it wasn't fun, but it wasn't a big deal.
No.
Then we go to Saturday. On Saturday, someone saw in the morning some customs guys entering the Paramount Business Center. ICE were using it as a staging area while they were making more arrests. This time it wasn't workplace raids. It was actually the kind of thing which most people agree with. I'll let the US attorney describe it.
We're going out and executing not search warrants, but arrest warrants on people who are charged with federal felonies related to their immigration status. People who've been previously deported and re-entered, it's a felony. We also were executing administrative removal orders. So these are people who've exhausted their due process rights in immigration court, and there's a final order for their deportation. We're going out and executing these orders as well. That's what the teams were doing today.
Okay, so this is not the going around picking up 7-Eleven workers. These are people who...
This is not the Steve Miller fantasy.
No.
This is the Tom Homan program.
That's right. Anyway, so the person who saw that, there were a bunch of ICE people in that building, put out an Instagram video of it, which spread. About 300 protesters turned up. After Friday's protest, ICE had plenty of reinforcements ready. Mm-hmm. And they got into it in a standoff with tear gas and flashbang grenades. Mm-hmm. You may have seen some of the videos like this one here. There's nothing particularly special about this. Just you've seen this 1,000 times. But the important thing here is while it looks kind of warish with all the tear gas and the explosions, people running around, it's not out of control like some things we've seen in the later days after that, right?
Yes.
The kind of thing the police could take care of pretty simply. Okay. ICE more than could look after themselves, by the way. They get pretty bloody militant in a few minutes. If you have a look at this next video there, look at that. That's ICE. Don't mess with those guys. You can tell they're ICE because they all have their faces covered, of course.
Yes.
But there were definitely signs of future trouble happening on this day. For example, some protesters saw an ICE-looking car in the street and they tried to kick the crap out of it en masse. We can see here. There we go. I mean, look, it's not a huge issue, but you just go, okay, well, this is tension is building here. The car can just drive away. It's not a problem, but tension is definitely building as they're trying to kick cars in the street. Right?
Yes.
One guy in particular went viral for throwing rocks at passing cars, which is obviously incredibly dangerous. This guy here, if you want to have a look, I don't know if you've seen this footage before, Dave, but he's just basically every car that goes by, he's just chucking rocks at, right? Yeah. He had a little friend there. He ended up getting found like 4 days later, even though he had a mask. They really put in a big effort to get him. Okay, so my favourite clip of the week, by the way, happened that night as well. I love this clip. Lockie's laughing. It's a good clip, isn't it? When some Hoons tried to set a car on fire.
Yep.
This is great. This is high-quality comedy, this. For those listening, there's some likely Darwin Award winners there. Lighting a car. It's a car engine soaked with petrol.
Yeah.
And they light it before they move away from the car.
Yeah. Just for... no, I don't want to explain to people how to be better Hoons, but petrol fumes light. Right, it's not just the liquid, it's the fumes.
You've got all the information you need from PEP. Okay. So plenty of aggro on Saturday is my point.
Yes.
But ICE were okay. They were dealing with it. The only issue was one agent had his wrist lacerated by a rock that got through his windscreen. That's it.
Yep.
ICE's main concern was they felt it took the police too long to arrive when they called them.
Yep.
ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons said, our brave officers were vastly outnumbered as over 1,000 rioters, I don't think it's 1,000, surrounded and attacked a federal building. It took over 2 hours for the Los Angeles Police Department to respond, despite being called multiple times. The LAPD just called them a liar. LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell said, when we heard that, I think anybody who's a police officer couldn't believe it. And certainly anyone with LAPD couldn't imagine how that could happen. Well, it didn't happen. He said their response time was actually just under 40 minutes, and the only reason it took that long was because A, traffic, B, crowd density, C, getting past tear gas everywhere, thank you, ICE, and D, the fact that the federal agents had given them no advance info whatsoever about what they were up to.
Yeah.
To be fair, why would they? LA is a sanctuary city, which means the police aren't supposed to help out ICE. They don't get in their way.
Yeah. When I say they're not supposed to help ICE in their investigations.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That doesn't mean they don't help ICE if they're surrounded by protesters.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't you can go around murdering ICE and the police will do nothing. But I'm just saying that like when they're just conducting normal operations, they have no reason to tell the police they're conducting normal operations because the police just stay out of their way anyway. That's how it works with the sanctuary city. Stay out of each other's way.
Yeah.
Obviously, when they called the police came.
Yes.
The police said, well, we had no idea you were even there.
Yes.
So it took us a little bit longer.
I have noticed ICE and the federal government and Trump allies are really trying to portray the LAPD as this sort of woke force.
Well, they are so not.
They are really, really not. Yes, Los Angeles is a Democratic-run city.
Yeah.
But the LAPD are not known for their wokeness, to put it mildly.
That is absolutely true.
Certainly not known for siding with protesters.
Yes. Anyway, but this is the start of when the propaganda battle started.
Yes.
Because this is what the LAPD ended up saying about Saturday in a statement. Mm-hmm. Today, demonstrations across the city remain peaceful, and we commend all those who exercise their First Amendment rights responsibly. The Los Angeles Police Department appreciates the cooperation of organisers, participants and community partners who helped ensure public safety throughout the day. While today's events concluded without incident, the LAPD remains fully prepared to respond swiftly and appropriately to any potential acts of civil unrest. Our commitment to safeguarding the rights, safety and well-being of all Angelenos continues day and night. That's what they said. This is what Steve Miller said about it. An insurrection against the laws and sovereignty of the United States. Obviously, he's using the word insurrection because he already wants Trump to declare the Insurrection Act.
Yes.
Right? This is what Trump said about it. If Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles can't do their jobs, which everyone knows they can't, then the federal government will step in and solve the problem. Riots and looters, the way it should be solved.
This is getting back to that point of the seriousness of the situation and the total unseriousness of the announcement.
It is. It's annoying.
Yes.
And so then, as soon as Trump does that, bang, it all of a sudden becomes a much bigger news story.
Uh-huh.
And that's when Trump decides to call out the National Guard right then and then.
Yes.
At the end of that day. Needless to say, from Sunday, everything got a lot more problematic. But that's how it began. Dave,
Yes.
do you have any comments about how it began and how it developed, in fact?
Okay. So, first of all, what had been happening prior to this was not a riot. And I'm hesitant to even characterize what happened afterwards as a riot. It was a protest. And usually when the National Guard is called out, it is at the invitation of the governor of the state. So it's the governor who actually has the responsibility for mobilising the National Guard.
Yes.
When federal troops are called in, it's usually because law enforcement has collapsed.
Yes.
And that is generally, when law enforcement and the governor feel they're completely overwhelmed, that's when they usually call in federal intervention. So this was very unusual in that the governor did not summon the National Guard, didn't summon federal help of any kind.
No.
And this was in response to something that was really pretty low level prior to this. When you can, and I'm a bit disturbed at some of the very historically illiterate takes that have been around about this, about the supposed scale of the LA riot. Not only is that sort of ignoring the 60s, the 70s, the 90s, it's ignoring things that happened 5 years ago. The Black Lives Matter protests were on such a bigger scale than this.
So much bigger. We've spoken to some people who at the protests.
Yes.
Who also the LA version of the BLM protests.
There was so much more violence. There was so much more destruction. There were so many more people. Yeah. That's only 5 years ago.
I actually think, to be fair, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
But I think that's part of the problem, though. Look, we said at the time, and I'm still saying it, that the vast majority of the protests in 2020 were actually peaceful protests.
Yes. Yep.
There were some that absolutely were not.
Yes.
And there were some that started peaceful and then got way out of control.
Yes.
Right. But I do think that the right are kind of deeply affected by 2020. And the reason why is because I think it's true that some people were playing down the violence in 2020. And they weren't acknowledging that there were some riots.
Yes, yeah.
Most of them were not.
Yep.
95% of them were not, because there were protests all over the country.
Yes.
But some of them were absolutely loony. It's just a fact. And at the time, there were people that were playing them down. And so now the right have got that in their head.
Yeah.
And they just think anytime someone says, actually, it's a peaceful protest, they go, oh, yeah, mostly peaceful. Here, have a look at this person getting their head beaten in. And then you just go, okay, well, that's one piece of footage. Like it's still...
Well, I mean... Yeah, yes, there were people playing them down. That was largely a response to the right claiming that entire cities were burning.
Yeah.
Right? So to their audience of XXX urbanites, they're claiming the entirety of Minneapolis, it's on fire. Whole thing. Burnt to the ground. Yeah.
No, I know. You can see how this happens.
Yes.
But I'm just saying, I can just see now.
Yes, yeah.
I can just see it online all the time. That they're like, we're doing the mostly peaceful protest thing again, aren't we?
But
they got it in their head.
Given how deeply scarred they were by 2020, it's amazing how much they've forgotten the political dynamics of 2020.
Yes.
2/3 of the country supported the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes.
You had a poll where 60% of people in a poll in Minnesota said that they supported the burning of a police station. Yeah. People didn't like the repression that was going on. Now, immigration has been a winning issue for Trump, but if there's anyone who can turn it into a losing issue really quickly, it's also Trump.
I think we should also explain, by the way,
Yep.
the reason why they might not have called National Guard out straight away, right? Because. Okay, let's take the Todd Lyons version of what happened on Saturday, which I think was way over the top.
Yep.
What he said. He said there were 1,000 people surrounding that ICE center, doing whatever they're doing, right? LAPD's got 9,000 officers, and Newsom has control over tens of thousands of other officers as well across California. Like, they could dwarf what had happened up to that point in time, like if they wanted to.
Yes.
And you don't need the National Guard until those people are overwhelmed.
Yes.
Like in the LA riots, the real LA riots.
Yes,
in
1992. Yeah.
The police were done.
Yeah.
They were completely overwhelmed.
Yes.
That's when you get the National Guard in. So the idea of getting the National Guard in when you're talking about likely 300 or 500 people.
Yeah.
Or even in fantasy world, 1,000 people. That you'd never do it. You wouldn't do it until there's at least 10,000, if not 20 or 30,000.
And I just want to say one more thing about the terminology of riot. One of the reasons I'm really resistant to it is, there's no precise definition for riot, but historically it involves lethal violence. If you were to hear about a riot in India, you would assume that people had died.
Yeah.
If you think about the riots that happened in Detroit in the 1960s, hundreds of people died in those. The LA riots, about 40 people died. Black Lives Matter protests across the country, about 21 people died in those. Nothing that was happening here was approximating lethal violence.
No, I told you the entire injuries. One lacerated wrist.
Yes.
That was the entire injuries.
Now, I've said before, usually the National Guard are invited in by the governor. Now, of course, there have been times when the National Guard have not been invited in by the governor. My favourite example of this is in 1962, when the University of Mississippi was refusing to desegregate despite a federal desegregation order.
Yes.
So the National Guard actually had to escort in the first black student, James Meredith, who was an architecture student. Weird guy, by the way. Had a very colourful political odyssey after that, which at one point involved him working for David Duke.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, that's another story that will be told another time. But anyway, the University of Mississippi was thinking about peacefully desegregating, but then apparently Ross Barnett, the governor of Mississippi, was at a college football game and was sort of called impromptu up at halftime to give a speech to the crowd who were baying for blood. And he was like, never, never, never. And then He came home to a call from RFK, the good RFK, Bobby Kennedy.
Yep.
Said Bobby Kennedy apparently asked him, "So, are you threatening to leave the Union?" That's kind of what I'm hearing. And, the governor apparently couldn't give a satisfactory answer to that question. In came the National Guard.
I see.
Yeah, the 30,000 National Guard. There were, more National Guard in Mississippi. There were more U.S. troops in Mississippi than there were in Korea at that time. But those are the kind of circumstances that it happens in generally, where there actually is something that can be construed as a rebellion. And it wasn't just that the governor seemed to be hinting that Mississippi would leave the Union. It was the fact that sheriff deputies were coming from all over the state of Mississippi to take pot shots at the National Guard.
Yeah.
Right. So it actually was something that was sort of approximating a state of open rebellion.
It hasn't even happened since 1965.
Yeah.
The Selma March was the last
Yes,
time.
yeah. That was when Johnson sent in the National Guard. Yeah. So those are the kinds of circumstances of actual rebellion. Now, Trump, tellingly, has still not invoked the Insurrection Act. Okay, he still keeps talking about the possibility of it, but the fact that he hasn't invoked it is significant. It's not an oversight because he actually gave an interview where he said, there were horrible things happening there. Not quite an insurrection, but something close. So he's deliberately actually saying this wasn't an insurrection that would, require invoking the Insurrection Act. So what's he actually doing then? Apart from ignoring Stephen Miller's quacking about an insurrection. If the Insurrection Act is invoked, as, by the way, it actually was in 1992, that means that the National Guard or whatever other federal troops get sent can be empowered to act as law enforcement.
That's correct.
That means they can actually arrest civilians. It would even mean they could carry out immigration raids.
It means they can do anything, essentially.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Now, the National Guard at the moment and the Marines, they're not empowered in that way.
No.
Okay? And you might think, well, this is the Trump administration. They often do things they're just not allowed to do. But no, these soldiers will be aware and their commanders will be aware of what they're actually legally allowed to do.
By all reports, they're sticking to it so far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In Gavin Newsom's word, they're standing around with nothing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of giving away my punchline a little bit here.
Yeah.
But I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
Most of them haven't even been assigned.
Yes.
Only 300 of them out of the 2,000 up to now it's 4,000.
Yeah.
Only 300 of them have had anything to do.
Yeah. So the violence that you are seeing, okay, and this is another way, I think it's been not explicitly, but it's been conflated in terms of images and things. I want to stress, this is not the National Guard. This is not the military that we are seeing firing rubber bullets at Australian reporters or hurling flashbang granades or any of that. This is the LAPD.
Yeah, these are the woke LAPD.
Yeah, this is the LAPD. And some of them seem to be enjoying what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's good that Trump has sent in the military. I think it's an abomination that he sent in the military. But I do want to point out that this is pure theatre.
Shall I go through the legals?
Yes.
Okay, on the order. Okay, so Trump's order was, first of all, it says he put us out a memo that said, numerous incidents of violence and disorder have recently occurred and threaten the faithful execution of federal immigration laws. Now, that's an important thing to note because of how the law is worded, which I'm about to get to. He also then says, violent protests threaten the security and significant damage to federal immigration detention facilities and other federal property.
The precious buildings.
Well, that's important again. Federal agents, federal property, and the execution of federal laws are all at risk.
Another reason why that's significant is because 5 years ago, that was also constantly invoked whenever they were talking about sending in the military, was to protect federal buildings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then it says, to the extent that protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of the laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. Now, that seems a little over the top, doesn't it? A rebellion against the authority of the government? If Trump really thought there was a rebellion happening, he probably wouldn't have, as soon as he signed that declaration, gone off to attend a UFC fight with Mike Tyson. Although, if the shit goes down, Mike Tyson's a good guy to be next to, isn't he?
If some ears need to be bitten.
But anyway, he should work for LAPD. Now, the reason he's talking about rebellion is because, once again, about the law. Because he then writes, I hereby call into federal service members and units of the National Guard under Title 10, Section 12406. Hereby.
Hereby, the magic word.
Hereby.
The abracadabra.
Drink. That's right. Okay, let's look at Title 10, Section 12406. Those who are watching the video can see it. Whenever there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, that's why he mentioned rebellions. Okay, because that's a precondition.
Yep.
And no, he doesn't even need to be right about there being a rebellion. Just the danger of a rebellion will do.
Yes.
Or the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. That's the next one, the federal laws of the United States.
Yep.
That's why he mentioned that.
Yep.
The president may call into federal service members and units of the National Guard or of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute those laws. Orders for these purposes shall be issued through the governors of the states. We'll come back to that last bit in a second. Importantly, you've probably heard about the Posse Comitatus Act, where Dave's talked about it a few times before, which stops that's the situation which Dave just described without using the term. It stops federal military personnel from acting as domestic law enforcement officers.
Yep.
Now, this law does not stop that. So, like you said, even invoking that law, Trump cannot use it to give the National Guard the power to control the crowd.
That's right.
They can just protect federal buildings, federal agents, and help them execute the law, which is why he said those three things.
Yes.
Trump does say, if we go back to the memo, he says the function of the 2,000 National Guard officers he's requesting will be, quote, to temporarily protect ICE and other United States government personnel who are performing federal functions, including the enforcement of federal law, and to protect federal property at locations where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur based on current threat assessments and planned operations. So he's not asking them to conduct raids or arrests. He's just asking them to do what they're allowed to do. That's all legal.
Yes.
Nothing dodgy about that.
No.
He's allowed to do that. Does that mean there are no problems with this declaration? No. It does not mean that.
Just because it's legal, it doesn't mean it's right.
But not just that.
Yes.
There are some bits which might be illegal.
Ah.
This bit is legal.
Okay.
But there are other bits. First, while in legal theory land, they might not be acting as law enforcement officers, in the real world, they're standing in the middle of a potential riot holding a gun. The violence might come to them.
Yes.
They might not have to go to the violence. And then what happens? Are they not going to return fire? Like, there's a very grey line between being law enforcement and not being law enforcement when you're in the middle of chaos and you're holding a weapon.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the first thing. It wouldn't be hard for them to get sucked into doing something they're not supposed to be legally doing. And they could also potentially still act as an accelerant for the violence, just standing there. The more it looks like you have military types policing citizens, the more corrosive it is to social harmony. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, here's an interesting excerpt from the memo. I hereby, drink, call into federal service members and units of the National Guard under 12406 to temporarily protect ICE and other United States government personnel at locations where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur based on current threat assessments and planned operations. Have you noticed what they don't have there? A location. Not only do they not limit the location to LA, but he's leaving the door open to the National Guard being called wherever protests against ICE are going on around the country. In fact, you don't even need a protest. I'll read it again. At locations where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur based on current threat assessments. So if the government thinks there may be a protest somewhere at some point in time, they can send the National Guard to jump in before it even happens.
Such as at a big, stupid military parade for Trump's birthday.
Oh, we're getting there. Don't worry. That's coming. So what we're talking about here is preemptive militarization. That's what we're talking about. And that's not an accident. On Sunday, Trump specifically said, we're going to have troops everywhere. The whole point about these militarization of law enforcement laws is that they're supposed to be a last resort.
Yes.
Not a first resort.
That's right.
Trump is using it as a first resort. I
Yes.
think that could be an illegal term. At least I hope it is.
Yes.
Although the next term I'm about to read could be worse. Third. Let me quote again. In addition, the Secretary of Defense may employ any other members of the regular armed forces as necessary to augment and support the protection of federal functions and property. He's citing 12406 as his legal justification, and 12406 only mentions the National Guard. It doesn't mention any other group.
Yes.
Yet in the memo, he's saying any members of the armed forces. I don't see his legal justification for that. He's got none. And a few days later, he's deploying the Marines using this very memo,
Yes.
which is illegal.
Yes.
So I'm a little bit concerned about that one.
I think it's incredibly concerning.
Yeah. Importantly, though, we should be clear, like Dave said, no citation Insurrection Act. Okay, so that's the legal stuff.
Yes.
Then there's historical and practical reasons why this sucks. You've already mentioned the historical reasons it sucks, right? But there's also practical ones. Like I already said, totally unnecessary. DHS has 80,000 law enforcement officers that he can call without the National Guard.
Yep.
Those 80,000 law enforcement officers can do whatever they like.
Because they're law enforcement officers.
Yes, exactly. So once again, he doesn't need the National Guard. He doesn't need 2,000 National Guard.
And
when he's-
700 Marines.
Yeah, when he's controlling 80,000 law enforcement officers from DHS.
And this is the real sort of theatre element
That you're spot on.
of this.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that what is a not a minor protest, but like what is essentially a protest, like nothing like the scale of protests 5 years ago, that this warrants the Marines.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it is intimidation. Like Carolyn Leavitt's, be warned, radical left, this is what's going to happen to you. A bunch of unassigned Marines are going to come and stand around in your town while the cops just shoot at you with, rubber bullets.
The Marines will be drinking in your bar. It's just waiting.
Yeah.
It might be trying to set precedents as well.
Yeah. So it's bad, but I do want to emphasize the theatricality of it.
100%.
Yes.
This next bit has not been mentioned enough, but I think this is actually it's getting towards the worst stuff. Basically, by stealing Newsom's National Guard, because that's what they're doing. It's actually Newsom's National Guard.
Yep.
And Trump is stealing Newsom's National Guard away from him and federalizing them. Trump is not only depriving Newsom of officers that he might want to use, like he's taking Newsom's forces away from Newsom.
Yes.
But he's actually making them completely useless. Because when the National Guard, this is what people don't understand, when the National Guard are federalized, they need to be very careful not to act as law enforcement. But when they're being used by the state that they are a part of, they can do whatever Newsom wants.
Yes.
They are law enforcement when Newsom uses them. And they've been trained to do law enforcement. They've been trained to do all kinds of things that they're not allowed to do when they're federalized. So let's say it does turn to a riot. Let's say Trump's right. And in 2 days' time it blows up and it's just there's death everywhere and you're going crazy. Those National Guard are now useless because they've been federalized.
Yep.
Whereas Newsom could have used them to kick some ass. Trump can't do that.
Yes.
Because he's federalized them, right? So the irony of this is by him trying to act tough, he's actually taking these resources and making them useless.
Yes.
In case they're actually needed.
Yes.
So good one, Trump. And then, like I said before, Trump didn't even use them. According to Newsom's office, 1,600 of the 2,000 National Guard officers are still in their armories waiting to have duties assigned as of Wednesday. Trump had, by that stage, already deployed 2,000 more National Guard and 700 Marines, while 1,600 of the first lot are still in their armories waiting to be told what to do.
Yeah. Again, it's announcer in chief.
Yeah, it is.
Mr. Announcement.
And by the way, The LAPD said this could create an additional logistical and operational challenge for them while trying to safeguard the city.
Damn right it could. What if a Marine gets in the way when you're trying to shoot at a journalist?
So Trump is actively creating headaches for the LAPD. Okay, so that's my little order update. What's the next thing you want to talk about this area? I've got other stuff, but just you can go on.
I want to look at a different aspect of this because it's been getting a little bit of coverage, but I feel without some of the historical context it deserves. That is the fact that a lot of the protesters carry Mexican flags.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Right.
Now, this is something that has given moderate Democrats massive headaches for a long time because this didn't start with these protests. This started in the 90s. This began with protests against Proposition 187, which was a California ballot measure that would have denied illegal immigrants access to basic state services. That ballot passed with 59% of the vote, including apparently like 26% of people of Mexican descent voted for that. So whenever there have been protests about the rights of undocumented migrants, they've involved Mexican flags.
Right.
And this gives a lot of Democrats aneurysms. Yeah. Like, why would you do this?
Yeah. It's not a great look on Fox News.
Not a great look on Fox News. It's like, you're making them think there's an invasion. Okay, there are actually good reasons for this. But before I get into that, just to show you how far back this goes, I want to read from the opening pages of one of the most influential political tracts of the 1990s, which was Samuel Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order.
Sure, why not?
Now, this book, I actually think it was basically a projection of American culture war anxieties onto international relations. I think the book that he wrote after this, called Who Are We?, that was actually much more what the whole thing was about for Huntington. I'm not disparaging Huntington because he was a very, very good and very, very important political scientist. And some of the things that he wrote about American politics, military-civilian relationships, and most importantly, the book Political Order in Changing Societies, these are really important foundational works in political science. He was a great political scientist. But by the 90s, he had become a culture war grump. Anyway, he writes about the significance of flags.
Sure.
Okay. On October 16th, 1994 in Los Angeles, 70,000 people marched beneath a sea of flags, of Mexican flags, protesting Proposition 187, a referendum measure which would deny many state benefits to illegal immigrants and their children. Why are they walking down the street with a Mexican flag and demanding that this country give them a free education? Observers asked. There's no citation to this by observers.
Sure.
He means Samuel Huntington asked. They should be waving the American flag. 2 weeks later, more protesters did march down the street carrying an American flag upside down. These flag displays ensured victory for Proposition 187, which was improved by 59% of California voters. Once again, no citation to the very major causal claim that flag protests resulted in the passage of this proposition, which, given the margin that it passed by, I think probably would have passed anyway.
Huge if true.
If you're wondering what happened to Proposition 187, it was immediately ruled illegal by the California Supreme Court, and it was never put into practice. But also, the trajectory went completely differently from how Samuel Huntington would have predicted. If that same ballot were held today in California, it would get rejected by probably a very similar margin. Yes, California became way more pro-immigrant after that, despite lots and lots of demonstrations then in Los Angeles that have involved people carrying the Mexican flag. Okay, so why do people carry the Mexican flag even though it alienates conservatives and moderate Democrats? It's to show solidarity, right? They're not interested in building political coalitions with people who reject them and threaten them. Okay, the Proposition 187, that was on the ballot before they started carrying Mexican flags down the street. They weren't proposing Proposition 187 because people were carrying Mexican flags. That was the response. And what they're saying is a lot of the people carrying those Mexican flags, these are American citizens. These are people born in the United States, third, fourth generation Mexicans, same as the people carrying Mexican flags now. They're saying, we know we are an identifiable group. We're also a community, right? There are something like 12 million people of Mexican descent in California. About 30% of the state is of Mexican descent. And the symbol that they have is the Mexican flag, right? There's no Mexican-American flag. The symbol that they have is the Mexican flag. Now, yes, it's not a good look on Fox News because it is the national flag of another country. But part of that is the denial of how closely intertwined the United States and Mexico are when it comes to California. Historically, cross-border movement has been the norm.
Yeah.
Historically, California was part of Mexico.
Yes.
Right. There's a saying in California, we didn't cross the border crossed us. There are 12 million people of Mexican descent, most of whom have families in Mexico. Crossing the border is a historically normal experience. So the Mexican flag is often a way of third or fourth generation Mexicans saying, we have solidarity with our parents. We have solidarity with our grandparents. We have solidarity with members of our community, including people who arrived recently from Mexico and including people who arrived without documentation. When the community feels under threat in that way, they feel that solidarity that is expressed by the Mexican flag is a lot more important than trying to reach out to people who want nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Right? So, no, they're not going to carry American flags.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I totally get why the moderate Democrats freak out by that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you don't need to explain to Australians about the fact that people in a ethnic community might hold flags
exactly
from the country that their community is associated with. That's pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, if anyone...
I've seen a lot of Italian flags in my time.
I know. if anyone in Australia remembers the great NSL wars, the National Soccer League wars of the 1990s, where they tried to ban national flags from grounds. This is in a competition where nearly every club had ethnic ties. There was, Marconi Fairfield, which was Italian, Sydney Olympic and South Melbourne, which were Greek. Teams literally called like Sydney Croatia and Melbourne Croatia. I think they had to change the name of that one to Sydney United. Pretty funny given the context of what was happening in the Balkans at the time. Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
So I get it. That's absolutely true.
Yes.
I should say as well, but before we move on to the next little bit, I just kind of asserted it, but let's just make very clear that after the effect on when all these National Guards were called, I mean, they didn't, as I said, they didn't actually do anything. They went out there.
Yeah.
But the protests went up a notch.
Yes.
When they got heightened.
Yes.
Even without the actual products.
Yes.
They just went up. That Sunday morning, the next morning, the National Guard didn't show up till Sunday night.
Yes.
Sunday morning, instantly, everything was bigger.
Yeah. And on Saturday night, the LAPD had been saying, we have the situation under control.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Whereas if you look at what they were saying on Sunday, it was very different. This is the what's his name, Jim McDonnell, the LAPD chief. Again, 5 officers and 5 horses had been injured that day, by the way, by the crowd. One guy had thrown a Molotov cocktail at the police. Jim McDonnell said, "This violence I've seen is disgusting. It's escalated now. What we saw the first night was bad. What we've seen subsequent to that is getting increasingly worse and more violent." And I should say as well that Newsom must have agreed, because at least on Monday he sent 800 more state and local law enforcement officers to clean up Trump's mess, is the way he put it. Chaos is exactly what Trump wanted. Now we're sending in hundreds more law enforcement to pick up the pieces, he said. And then on Monday, things seemed to calm down again, which was when Trump decided that another 2,000 National Guard and the Marines had to get sent, which is strange. Oh, by the way, when the 700 Marines were deployed, only 300 of them actually hit the streets after that. 400 are just sitting around at the bars that I just described before.
Yes.
Probably see next to the 3,700 or 3,600 National Guardsmen wondering what to do. I should say as well that the whole thing of the Marines, typically disorganized from Hegseth, after they were deployed, the The Defense Department was still trying to work out their rules of engagement. Which is, and there was a huge legal question mark over them for what I told you before. Also, let me quote you the Jim McDonnell about the Marines. It's interesting. The LAPD has not received any formal notification that the Marines will be arriving in Los Angeles. This is on Monday after they've been deployed. However, the possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles, absent clear coordination, presents a significant logistical and operational challenge for those of us charged with safeguarding this city. The Los Angeles Police Department, alongside our mutual aid partners, have decades of experience managing large-scale public demonstrations, and we remain confident in our ability to do so professionally and effectively. That said, our top priority is the safety of both the public and the officers on the ground. We're urging open and continuous lines of communication between all agencies to prevent confusion, avoid escalation, and ensure a coordinated, lawful, and orderly response during this critical time.
Where are they quartering the Marines?
I've got no idea.
Airbnb?
I have no idea. I know a basement they can stay in. But that's right. And Newsom sent out photos of them lying head to foot on the floor of some building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they don't really have a place for them.
Yeah.
Apparently also the Marines cost $134 million, even for this completely unnecessary and possibly self-defeating exercise. So where do you want to go next in this topic?
Other than saying, this isn't exactly a recruitment ad for the Marines.
No, it's not. Okay, all right, okay. Well, the next place I'm going to go is to the relentless whipping up of drama from Trump and Hegseth.
Yes.
Hegseth was calling for the Marines before the National Guard arrived. He was that keen to escalate.
Yep.
And Trump, oh my God. Okay, all right. Let's just go through Sunday. I'm not going through the whole Sunday. I'm just going to take a couple of tweets from Sunday. Trump... I would not be surprised if he was sitting with popcorn. He was watching TV all day, tweeting about it. He was loving it. Okay, so let's start off with this. A once great American city, Los Angeles, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. Now, violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try and stop our deportation operations. But these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. I am directing Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, in coordination with all the other relevant departments and agencies, to take all such action necessary to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots. Order will be restored, the illegals will be expelled, and Los Angeles will be set free. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Drink. But as the hours rolled by the way, he's good. He does have a way with words. I'm assuming he writes these because they're so florid. But like he's not a bad writer. Do you disagree?
No, I completely disagree.
I reckon like writing kind of, C grade kind of pulp kind of airport novels. I could see him being a huge success. Anyway,
would you read one?
No, but I don't read.
Why do you think anyone else would?
Well, because.
It's bad.
I read blogs. No one cares what I read. Anyway,
it's every sentence has 17 too many words.
Yeah, that's part of the form, Dave. Pay tribute to the form. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
The adjectives pile up.
They do.
Like a highway crash.
It's like Everybody Hurts, the R.E.M. film clip. It's beautiful. Anyway, as the hours roll by, Trump kind of lost the ability to speak. His tweets became short staccato bursts of words. Like, for instance, paid insurrectionists and arrest the people in face masks now. Which is a strange thing to tweet when ICE are all wearing face masks.
Yes.
And
it is also just like watching this on television and interacting with the television the same way that I interact with it when West Tigers are playing.
Yes.
Like, just run straight.
Yeah.
Don't pass it into the stands. Yeah, it's a weird thing to do when you're the president.
It is. But he did on January 6th as well. Okay. So and the final one, which he tweeted out, which I liked as well, was looking really bad in LA. Bring in the troops. I mean, he's the
yeah, exactly.
He's the guy. Anyway, but for him, it kind of became a win-win because when things looked bad, he'd blame Newsom and Bass.
Yep.
But when they started to look a bit better, he'd just take credit for it and congratulate himself. Sometimes he'd do both. at the same time. like in this tweet here, we made a great decision in sending the National Guard to deal with the violent, instigated riots in California. If we'd not done so, Los Angeles would have been completely obliterated. The very incompetent...
Completely obliterated.
Completely obliterated.
My God. Does he have any idea how big Los Angeles is?
Not as big as 300 angry people who like to kick cars.
I mean, most of the stuff you've been seeing on TV has happened in about 6 downtown blocks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same footage over and over again.
I'm actually quite familiar with those 6 downtown blocks because this was where the American Political Science Association conference was held a couple of years ago. And I was staying at the Western Bonaventure Hotel, which I did a grateful about at the time because I love that hotel.
I remember that.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure I've seen the hotel in this footage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that place is bleak at the best of times.
No wonder they're so angry.
Yeah.
So LA would have been obliterated. The very incompetent governor, Gavin Newsom, and Mayor Karen Bass should be saying, "Thank you, President Trump. You're so wonderful. We'd be nothing without you, sir."
He actually tweeted that.
See?
That is incredible.
In all caps.
The fantasies.
Instead,
imagine admitting that that's your fantasy.
We all know what the fancy component is primarily there, that they call them sir.
Yeah.
Instead, they choose to lie to the people of California and America by saying that we weren't needed and that these are peaceful protests. Just one look at the pictures and videos of the violence and destruction tells you all you have to know. We'll always do what's needed to keep our citizens safe so we can together make America great again. Then on Monday, he said this.
Are you planning to deploy Marines in California to address the situation in Los Angeles? Are you going to deploy Marines in California?
We'll see what happens. I mean, I think we have it very well under control. I think it would have been a very bad situation. It was heading in the wrong direction. It's now heading in the right direction. And we hope to have the support of Gavin because Gavin's the big beneficiary as we straighten out his problem.
And then he... straight after that, more than doubled the troops and called in 2,000 National Guard and 700 Marines. So he's playing both sides. Although my favourite moment was when he tweeted, "Great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles. After 2 days of violence, clashes, unrest, we have an incompetent governor, Newsom, and Mayor Bass, who are as usual. Just look at how they handled the fires, and now they're very slow permitting disaster. Federal permitting is complete." In brackets, that's weird. Unable to handle the task. These radical left protests by instigators and often paid troublemakers will not be tolerated. Also from now on, masks will not be allowed to be worn at protests. What do these people have to hide and why? Again, thank you to the National Guard for a job well done. That was about 6 hours before they turned up. I love that. So the fact is, he doesn't care about the details because he just loves this shit.
Yes.
There've been so much. I'd be interested in your take on this. A lot of people have been talking about the tactics that Trump is trying to do. He's trying to normalize this, or he's trying to do that, I believe that Steve Miller has lots of tactics.
Yes.
I don't think Trump has tactics.
No.
I think Trump just loves it.
Yes.
I think that he deeply believes that you should crush protesters. Way back in 1990, he was being interviewed by Playboy.
Yeah.
Check out the cover, by the way. look at that look on his face. Well, for those who can't see, we're looking at a 40-something Trump thinking he is way better looking than he is. And he's got a model backed up against him. Oh my God, look at that look. He looks confused. He's like, why is she posed like this? Anyway, it's kind of gross.
Hang on, what are the other things on the magazine? What are the other headlines? Rock and racism. Has the dark side taken over pop music?
Yeah.
Is that a pro-racist or anti-racist position? I'm not entirely sure.
Facts and figures, like fax machine.
Facts and figures. Sex comes to the electronic office.
Okay.
Okay.
In Cars 1990, we picked the hottest, sharpest, sexiest. World-class playmates from our far-flung empire. Yeah, that sounds like Playboy. Anyway, when they weren't talking about their far-flung empire, they interviewed Donald Trump. And he was saying why he wasn't impressed with the Soviet Union. Quote, Their system is a disaster. What you'll see there soon is revolution. The signs are all there. He said in 1990. Like, I mean, 1989, the place is falling to bits.
Oh, yeah, Eastern Europe was.
Yeah. Scorpions were making songs in 1990. Yeah, Russia's out of control and the leadership knows it. That's my problem with Gorbachev, not a firm enough hand. And then the interviewer asks, you mean firm hand as in China? Bear in mind, this is only a couple of years after Tiananmen Square.
1 year after, yeah.
Yeah, and Trump replies, when the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. Then they were vicious. They were horrible, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength. Our country is right now perceived as weak, as being spit on by the rest of the world. That's what he thinks. And he's still going about being spat on as well.
Yes.
He famously wanted to fire on the protesters in 2020, but when his defense secretary refused, he gave in. And then in 2020, he did rationalize not going through with a firm hand this way.
Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that. Even in a Portland case, we can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor.
But by 2023, he was expressing regrets about that. In a rally at the time, he reflected on 2020 and said, you're supposed to not be involved in that. You just have to be asked by the governor or the mayor to come in. The next time, I'm not waiting. So I think he's just doing now what he thinks is the right thing to do. I don't think he's trying to create an escalation to advance his cause. I think he wants to kick hippie ass. I think that's what he wants. He detests protesters unless they're on his side. Then he loves them and he'll pardon them. I don't think there's a tactic to this at all. I think he genuinely just, whenever there's the chance to kick some protesters' asses, he's for it. What do you think?
No, I think he would have invoked the Insurrection Act if that's what he wanted. As I say, I think that he wants the theatre of it. I actually think there is a bit of political strategy going on.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, this is the idea that he wants to create this image of the country. Well, so there's certain parts of the country being in crisis.
Yep.
And that will justify whatever he wants to do. So something like this requires troops to be there. The fact that he's not invoking the Insurrection Act means that he thinks it's more important just to have them there than to have them actually doing anything. I think it is worth thinking about why. What is stopping him from invoking the Insurrection Act at the moment?
I think that
there'd be legal challenges to it.
Yeah, there would. But maybe you're right. Legal challenges aren't necessarily a concern for him.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question why he hasn't.
I think it is actually because, even as you said, he regrets the fact that they didn't fire on protesters in 2020. I think he's actually got some consciousness. This may seem strange. He's actually got some consciousness of the fact that things have the potential to go very wrong. If you send in the military, especially if you send in the Marines, to do law enforcement, and that actually under these circumstances, like 6 months into his presidency, if his troops start using live ammunition on protesters, then he's probably lost that one politically.
It's certainly the case that right now the images are fantastic for him.
Yeah.
Like they suit him beautifully. Violent blue state lefties. They can show the same footage of that guy with a flag on the car over and over again doing crazy shit. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Set that car on fire. Love it. As long as the police stay in control.
Yes.
As soon as, as you say, the Marines come in and start with the live ammunition, then they're not great images for him anymore.
No. Now, this is not to say he won't do that at some point in his presidency, but I think what Trump always wants is to make threats to get what he wants. Okay, I see this is basically a way of making threats. This is a way of trying to intimidate. This is what he always hopes will happen, is that the threat will be enough to get what he wants. In this case, to make the protesters go away, to force the California authorities into taking tough action themselves against the protesters, whatever. Now, at the moment, he hasn't got a good track record of his threats working. Right, we've talked about this a lot. He makes threats. He doesn't follow through with them. That cheapens the value of the threats every time. So I think that is part of what's going on here. It's the hope that it's the hope that the display is actually going to work on his own. The fact is, though, the very image of protests happening now shows a certain weakening. So when Trump was at the height of his strength at the start of this term, what was everyone pointing out? The fact that there were no protests.
Yeah.
The fact that there was no resistance.
Yep.
Now, we're at the beginning of his first summer, protests all over the place, resistance all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. But so how do you feel? I mean, there's certainly in the mainstream media, there's a lot of coverage about how this is perfect for him.
I don't think it is.
I was going to say, in the Atlantic, a senior White House aide was quoted as saying, "We couldn't have scripted this better. It's like the 2024 election never ended. Trump is strong while Democrats are weak and defending the indefensible."
That's what you would expect one of his spokespeople to say.
It is.
I can remember them saying the same shit around the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. Right? The fact is, when people see something that looks like a riot on TV, they associate that disorder with whoever the government is. And they don't split hairs about which state it happened in, right? This stuff didn't happen during the Biden presidency. For all of the problems with the Biden administration, riots were not one of them.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Police fighting protesters wasn't one of them.
Was
a feature of the last Trump presidency, though.
Would Trump be happy about the fact that at least it makes him look like a strong man? Like the taco thing.
Yes.
Like this isn't very taco.
But if the protests just escalate as a result of him sending in troops, it doesn't make him look like a strong man.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a Quinnipiac poll that came out today that showed his approval rating at 38%. Now, that admittedly is way below where polls have been in recent weeks, but Quinnipiac's a higher quality poll than a lot of the polls that have been coming out in recent weeks. It also showed him in negative territory on immigration.
Yeah.
The Washington Post had a poll that came out today. Now, admittedly, it wasn't the most scientific poll they've ever conducted. The way they presented it was, we texted 1,000 Americans. They had an oversample of 300 Californians, but they found a majority against sending troops to Los Angeles. I mean, obviously, vast majority of Democrats against it, vast majority of Republicans in favor of it. Independents, it was like 55 to 30-something against. Californians, it was about 60% against. So I don't think that having law enforcement brawling with protesters is actually ever a popular look for the government. I think there's a lot of mythology around the fact that Nixon did it so effectively that this can be a winning issue. But I don't really think it ever is.
I was going to say the other polling I've seen, YouGov, do you approve of the LA protests? 36-45.
Mm-hmm.
So 36% approve, 45% disapprove. Do you approve of the National Guard being deployed? 38% approve, 45% disapprove.
Yes.
Do you approve of the Marines being deployed? 34% approve, 47% disapprove.
Mm-hmm.
Do you approve of Trump's handling of deportations? 39% approve, 50% disapprove. They don't like anything.
Yes.
They're just not happy. Who should take the lead in responding to the protests? There's YouGov still.
Mm-hmm.
State and local authorities, 56%. Federal government, 25%.
Mm.
Are the protests mostly peaceful?
Mm-hmm.
38%. Mostly violent? 36%.
Mm.
So the jury's kind of still out, but they're just generally not happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is not the we couldn't have scripted this better issue that they think it is. And you know which two groups of people know that? One is Gavin Newsom and his political allies who think that this is the best thing that could have happened to Governor Newsom.
Oh, it works well for him.
They want him to get arrested. They are desperately hoping
asking for it.
that Tom Homan will actually come himself to arrest Gavin Newsom because he is a presidential aspirant.
Yeah.
He is not that popular with Democrats outside of California or with a lot of Democrats inside California.
Yeah.
He's building his resistance bona fides, which he didn't have before.
Exactly. exactly.
Yes.
He's elevating himself to be Trump's major opponent.
Yes.
Which is great for Newsom.
Yes.
He can't get enough of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's getting us used to him being the left's champion.
Yes.
He can't get enough of that either. I'm not going to do it, but I had a whole section on the Newsom arresting stuff.
Yeah.
Because the phrase didn't feel sorry for, but I did think that Tom Homan was very much misrepresented by Gavin Newsom. Like Tom Homan was not at all suggesting he wanted to arrest Gavin Newsom. The journalist asked him, just after he'd done a bit where he said, anyone who breaks the law, we're going to arrest. And he said, well, you're going to arrest Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. He said, well, anyone who breaks the law, if they break the law, then we're going to arrest them. And you go, okay. So then the same reporter is then interviewing Gavin Newsom goes, Tom Homan hasn't ruled out arresting you. And you go, oh, come on, mate. That's such verbaling.
Yeah.
And Newsom knew what was going on. He loved it. Like you said, he just loved it. Arrest me. Come on, arrest me.
He even said tough guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, I was going to say, this is definitely great for Newsom. There's no doubt about that. The other poll, just a really interesting poll. Because one thing which is good about this for Trump, at least, is that this changed the topic from Musk and all that kind of stuff to immigration.
Yes.
In a way that's legal, at least.
Yes.
As opposed to El Salvador.
Yes.
Right? And so CBS, they asked, do you approve of Trump's deportation goals? 55% approve, 45% disapprove.
Mm-hmm.
Do you approve of his deportation approach? 44% approve, 56% disapprove. Now, that's a very subtle difference.
Yes.
For it to create 10%, 11% difference in the poll shows that subtle difference is registering.
Yes.
And so I think that's something to watch.
Yeah. Like he's turning a winning issue into a losing issue.
Yeah.
Yes. The other group that doesn't think that this is perfectly scripted by Republicans is protesters themselves. When protesters see the National Guard coming, they're like, great, more of us are coming out because now we've got something even more to protest against.
Yeah.
After 6 months of people complaining about there's no resistance going on, there are no protests, we're letting this happen, we're letting fascism come to America, we're just letting them march right past us. Now, all of a sudden, they've got the pretext to be, we can be the people who fight back. You know, we can be the resistance that Nazi Germany never had.
Yeah.
This is what people are thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how many of them are aware of how constrained the National Guard and the Marines actually are by the law that's sent them there, but they're certainly acting as if they're aware of that. Yeah.
Okay, talking about which. You raised it before. Let's go there now. There's a protest on Saturday. The Trump is going to be having his little military parade / ego stroke.
Yes.
And there is the No Kings protest, which is supposed to be held in 1,500 cities. Although I might add, one of them isn't Washington, D.C.
Right.
They're trying to not. They say they're going for contrast, not conflict.
Right.
But so they're intentionally avoiding Washington, where the military march is. But there'll be protesters there.
Yes.
There
certainly will be. Yes.
And Trump's got that floating declaration out there now about the National Guard who can pop up anywhere according to his order. And this is what he's got to say.
And we're going to be celebrating big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but, this is people that hate our country. But they will be met with very heavy force.
So the one thing Trump's very certain of is how much force protesters are going to be met with. He's very certain about that. Not rioters, mind you. Protesters.
Protesters.
That's his word.
Yep.
Protesters. He's promising heavy force for protesters. Now, unlike Gavin Newsom's fake arrests, that is actually authoritarianism.
Yes, totally.
You're hearing there. And this is where we have this clip, which I play on Play America, which I don't think I can play enough. Which is when, do you remember when Hegseth was asked about Esper refusing to shoot people in the legs in 2020?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, let's just play that one again, just because I think that might be a relevant one coming up.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C., an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry
holding
out
a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured
Secretary
by
Esper?
rioters trying to jump over the fence, set
Again,
the church on fire, and destroy
You know
a
what? That
statue.
sounds to me that you will
Chaos.
comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg.
How much of a problem have we got, Dave, on Saturday?
Yeah. I mean, it depends whether it's obviously before or after lunchtime, how Pete Hegseth is going to react. But yeah, that's a significant problem. Now, it would be a complete disaster for Trump if on the day of his military parade birthday, protesters were getting shot in the legs.
That would be bad.
It would be a complete disaster. And once again, I think he's actually conscious of that. That might be something he's prepared to do later in his presidency, but I don't think he wants to do it at this point where he should still be in a kind of honeymoon period. Yeah. I doubt that's going to happen, but who knows? Yeah. There are a lot of people too carried away with their own power in that administration.
I got one more thing to add on this topic. Do you have anything else to add on this topic?
No.
Okay, then I'll just say it. And that is, what we are seeing here is a sneak preview. It's the tiniest sneak preview of what is to come if the big, beautiful bill passes. Because the big, beautiful bill has $168 billion for immigration enforcement in it.
Yes.
Even without this bill, Congress has already appropriated 8 times as much funding to the Border Police as the FBI and twice as much money to the immigration protection people as all other federal law enforcement combined. There's a graph about this, which, look at that. That's immigration is the big stack there with like $33 billion. That's without the big, beautiful bill. That's what's already been apportioned. And on top of that, the administration is diverting thousands of agents from other agencies to help immigration right now. But then you add the appropriated $33 billion with the $168 billion in the big, beautiful bill, you get $200 billion, which looks like this on the graph, which is a lot more. So you can say immigration is dwarfing all other forms of law enforcement federally now, right? Okay. That's meant to last 5 years, possibly 10. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump doesn't spend it all in a year or two because he knows he can then demand more money, and who's going to turn him down when the alternatives is stop defending the border. So what's it got in it? It's got at least 10,000 new agents, which would more than double the number of enforcement removal operation agents. It's got the detention budget would quadruple by 2028. The transportation removal budget would increase 5-fold. There's currently about 50,000 people detained, so that means that ICE would likely be detaining more than 200,000 people at a time once the funding kicks in. At the moment, they're getting about 10 detentions a year for each detention bed available, like cycling them through.
Yep.
It's about 2 million people being detained annually under the big, beautiful bill. At this point, immigration would have more detention funding than the entire Federal Bureau of Prisons. And it would have more agents on board than the entire FBI, but no funding for extra oversight from the DHS. H.R. 1 also appropriates $3.4 billion for state and local immigration enforcement efforts, which means they can deputise local officers as well, as much as they like. As an aside, if they got 8.7 million migrants to leave over 5 years, then the CBO's budgeted that is increasing the debt by about $1 trillion. Just a little aside, $900 billion to be precise. Anyway, if this bill passes, You can expect a lot more raids, a lot more mysterious disappearances,
Yes.
a lot more strong arming, and a lot less accountability.
Yes.
I think you can expect a huge amount more protesting.
Yep.
And the next time, ICE will turn up with some weapons you haven't seen before, and those protesters will not like those weapons. Don't worry about the Marines.
Yes, yeah.
ICE will be the guys to worry about the next time around.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yes. ICE is what I'm worried about. Yeah, because, I mean, even before Trump, they were pretty out of control. The amount of complaints that they would get, by complaints, I don't mean like bad customer service complaints. I mean, people alleging sexual assault was huge.
Yeah.
Yes. Because they have the most vulnerable people in America in detention, and there's an incredible amount of abuse that goes on. As I've said before, yeah, so they're going to be recruiting 10,000 more agents really, really quickly.
Yeah, so
You
high
think-
quality control.
Yeah, you think they're going to be getting the cream of the crop? No, as I've said, I think they're going to be getting people who see the massive extortion opportunities that this is creating.
Well, they'll be getting people who are excited by the last few days.
Yes.
Like who've watched that and gone, yeah, I want to join the team.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to get.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to make so many people in America so insecure, not just illegal immigrants, but anybody who could be, potentially sort of fingered as an illegal immigrant could end up in the same process, whether they ultimately get deported or not. It's going to create huge incentives for members of criminal gangs to use this against people that they don't like.
Well, especially when you got the Lake and Riley Act up there.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
For those who've forgotten, the Lake and Riley Act means if you are merely accused of committing various crimes as an illegal immigrant, you are instantly deported.
Yep. So people with just grudges are going to make use of this. And as I say, there are going to be huge extortion rackets. Yeah, like pay us or we get you deported.
Yeah.
Pay us or we deport you.
Yep.
It's and this is going to be the focus of federal law enforcement for the next 4 years. I think people are going to realise this doesn't actually improve their lives at all. This actually does nothing to help Americans at all. But anyway.
We've got 20 minutes, Dave.
Yes.
We've got 3 topics.
What are the topics?
So you can pick. We got RFK, we got FEMA, and we got Abrego Garcia. Probably you can leave out Abrego Garcia because I'll do that after you're gone.
No, I actually want to talk about Abrego Garcia.
Well, let's do it.
I think that
Fine by me.
and I think that this is this is congruent with everything that we've been talking about so far.
Certainly is. Oh, dude, we got to play a sting. Oh, yeah. Love that sting. Thank you, Sam. It's one of our best stings. Let's like to play it. All right, so Kilmer Abrego Garcia back in America, but to face charges. You remember how I became kind of fixated on that time back in 2022 when Garcia was pulled over by a Tennessee highway patrolman for speeding? And he was driving about 8 guys who didn't speak English, didn't have ID or luggage, and who all gave his home address in Maryland as their home address, even though he had supposedly driven them from Texas. And he said he was just bringing them back to Maryland for construction work, and how while he was talking to the cop, his story changed about where he was going from Maryland to Missouri, and how he said it was his boss's car, and it turned out the car was owned by a guy who'd been convicted of human trafficking. That dude, convicted of human trafficking, turns out he's got a big mouth.
Yeah.
And I always thought that this was the most noteworthy evidence against him, and that is what he's been charged for. His convicted boss ended up telling the feds he'd hired Garcia multiple times to help move undocumented immigrants across the country. And Attorney General Pam Bondi revealed they had a sealed indictment against him for 3 weeks. And this is what the grand jury found about him.
He made over 100 trips, the grand jury found, smuggling people throughout our country. MS-13 members, violent gang terrorist organization members throughout our country. Thousands of illegal aliens were smuggled. This is especially disturbing because Abrego Garcia is also alleged with transporting minor children. The defendant traded the innocence of minor children for profit. There are even more disturbing facts that the grand jury uncovered. It is alleged this defendant is part of the same smuggling ring responsible for the death of more than 50 migrants in 2021 after the tractor trailer overturned in Mexico. This is part of that same ring. The defendant abused undocumented alien females, according to co-conspirators, who were under his control while transporting them throughout our country. This defendant trafficked firearms and narcotics throughout our country on multiple occasions. They were using vehicles, SUVs, with added seats in the back, floors that had been ripped out, guns, narcotics, children, women, MS-13 members. That is what the grand jury found.
And just to troll people like me, she then said,
"This is what American justice looks like."
Yes, keeping someone in a Salvatorian gulag for 3 months without any due process is what American justice looks like, apparently. Anyway, 2 charges, Dave. Conspiracy to transport aliens and unlawful transportation of undocumented aliens. So basically the same charges. One's a conspiracy, one's the actual doing it. Facing 10 years jail for each person smuggled, and they said he smuggled thousands of people, over 100 runs that occurred over a decade. So if the charges stick, talking life imprisonment. You start off. You get the new ball. What do you want to say about it?
So most of the evidence comes from a convicted human trafficker.
2 convicted human traffickers.
2 convicted human traffickers.
Yes, yeah.
What incentive do you think they have to talk to the feds about this incredibly high-profile case where the feds are absolutely desperate to get evidence?
I can tell you their incentive. Their incentive is, can I play the Fed? You can play them?
Yeah.
Hey, scum, want to go to El Salvador? No? Then tell me what happened with Abrego Garcia. That's their incentive. Don't go to El Salvador.
Yeah.
Should I play the sting again? Maybe not reliable evidence.
Yeah. Now, okay, maybe he will get found guilty, but I just want to put that on the table.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, if their evidence is coming from jailhouse snitchers who are, looking for ways to stay out of El Salvador, then might not be the most reliable evidence.
Yeah. My most important point is this proves that everything the admin, the administration and their friends have been saying is bullshit.
Yes.
They've been saying all along they had no power to get him back. Turns out they were lying. As soon as they asked for him back, Bukele immediately let them have him. Bukele said he couldn't come back because it'd be like Bukele smuggling a terrorist into America. That always sounded like bullshit, and of course it was.
Yes.
Kristi Noem testified to Congress that there is no scenario where Abrego Garcia will be in the United States again. So it does raise the question for me, Dave. What about all the other guys in El Salvador? Why can't they come back to face trials and receive their due process? Why can't the administration ask for them back as well? Because all of them are in El Salvador without being charged with anything as well. So that's my first point.
Yes.
Would you like me to keep going, or do you want to jump in?
No, you keep going.
Okay, you jump in wherever you want. What happens to Garcia after the trial is a good question. If he's found guilty, that's easy. He serves his time here. If he's not found guilty, they say he'll be returned to El Salvador after he completes his sentence. Presumably, they can get the withholding order that is supposedly stopping him being sent to El Salvador removed in the meantime. There's every chance, though, that there is not enough evidence to nail him here, like you just said.
Yeah.
They'll clearly try and manufacture some charges, so they might not stick. I expect that they'd probably get the withholding order removed.
Yes.
But what if they then just send him to a third country, which is what they can do?
Rwanda.
South Sudan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because remember, there is actually a valid deportation order against him right now to any country in the world other than El Salvador. Also note, he could yet be charged with more. Bondi mentioned in in her press conference that in the indictment there were other accusations from co-conspirators, including that he abused women under control, solicited nude images from minors, play a role in the rival gang members' mother's murder. Interesting, she didn't charge him with any of that.
No.
I'm getting a little bit sick of, this is my main point here, I'm getting a little bit sick of Bondi trying to spoil the jury pool. She does it every time.
Yes.
Like, she's got an indictment. Just talk about the indictment. Why are you talking about stuff that didn't make the indictment? It's very frustrating. Anyway.
Are you suggesting that someone who withdrew from prosecuting Trump University after she got a massive $25,000 donation from the Trump Foundation, are you suggesting that she's not 100% legally pure?
Maybe I am. Maybe I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, it's quite frustrating to me how relentlessly the administration tries to undermine the rule of law. But anyway, let me ask you, are these charges a pretext or are they real? Because it seems like an amazing coincidence that the two co-conspirators who are providing most of this case decide to testify just now.
As we said earlier, they would have spent weeks and weeks looking for anything that they could have been able to find on him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say these charges are a pretext.
And it is noteworthy that a high-ranking federal prosecutor in Nashville, Ben Schrader, resigned just as the charges were being brought.
Yes.
He'd been prosecuted for 15 years and was the chief of their criminal division. So he'd seem relevant to these charges. Anonymous sources said there was a connection, but all he said publicly was, "It's been an incredible privilege to serve as a prosecutor with the Department of Justice, where the only job description I've ever known is to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons."
Yeah. That kind of sounds like he's making a statement there.
It kind of does, doesn't it? Full credit to Van Hollen. Let's give Van Hollen some credit here.
Yeah.
Like, we can't know why Abrego Garcia was brought back.
Yes.
But the Supreme Court, obviously they played a role by demanding he get brought back. But the Supreme Court, what gives them their bite is public opinion.
Yes.
The Supreme Court didn't change public opinion.
No.
Van Hollen changed public opinion. Yeah. The public awareness of the case advanced by him and his trip to El Salvador, that had an effect. It's one of those times when doing the political, cheesy political thing.
Yes.
Did some good.
Yes.
It did. So, I thought his statement was good as well, by the way. I'll read his statement. For months, the Trump administration flouted the Supreme Court and our Constitution. Today, they appear to have finally relented to our demands for compliance with court orders and with the due process rights afforded to everyone in the United States. As I've repeatedly said, this is not about the man. It's about his constitutional rights and the rights of all. The administration will now have to make its case in the court of law, as it should have all along. Perfect.
Yes.
It's not like, don't make Abrego Garcia a hero. He might be an awful human being.
He might be.
It's not about him.
Yes.
It's about the rule of law.
Absolutely.
Sorry, what are you about to say?
How long is this process going to take? I mean, if given everything he's been accused of, trafficking thousands of people allegedly hundreds of times, this sounds like a pretty complicated criminal case.
Yeah, this could be a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any conspiracy case takes a while to make.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this could be a few years.
Yeah. I mean, that is if they can make it at all.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this sounds like the sort of thing that might not even be resolved until after the Trump administration is over.
It's possible.
Yes.
It's possible. Another thing, this is not just about Abrego Garcia. He's not the only person who was wrongly and accidentally deported. He's also not the only person who was wrongly and accidentally deported who was brought back this week. Because it looks like they're cleaning up some loose ends this week. A gay Guatemalan asylum seeker known in court documents as OCG was also returned this week. He arrived in May 2024 from Guatemala, sought asylum. An officer agreed he had a credible fear of persecution and torture if he returned to Guatemala. A judge agreed with that, so they granted him a withholding of removal to Guatemala. He had no criminal history, but the feds wanted to deport him anyway, because right now they want to deport everyone. During his proceedings, he asked if he might be sent to Mexico. And the judge replied, "We can't send you back to Mexico. You're a native of Guatemala." He said that's relevant because Well, sorry, he didn't say this. It was relevant to him because he claims to have been held hostage and raped while passing through Mexico. Only been released after his family paid the ransom. 2 days after he was granted the withholding order, he was deported to Mexico, after which he then returned to Guatemala himself to go into hiding. The problem here was that the government submitted in a sworn declaration that it could prove he had no fear of returning to Mexico. Despite the fact they knew his history. They lied. Judge Brian Murphy is the judge here. The court was given false information upon which it relied twice to the detriment of a party at risk of serious and irreparable harm. OCG is likely to succeed in showing his removal lacked any semblance of due process, and he told them to bring him back. This week they did bring him back. So that's happening. But there's still one guy who's sweating in a Salvadoran gulag whose case is even worse. In fact, it's similar to Abrego Garcia's, but much more damning for Trump, that is.
Yes.
His name's Christian. His actual name, that's his fake name. His actual name is Daniel Lozano Camargo. The case is JOP versus DHS. He's in CCOT after the government violated a court-enforced settlement agreement prohibiting his removal from the United States, similar to Abrego Garcia. In this case, Christian is one of the unaccompanied minors covered by a December 2024 settlement agreement prohibiting their removal from the United States while they have their asylum application pending. So he's a minor. The government sent him to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act, despite that settlement agreement and asylum claim that was live. And he's a Venezuelan citizen. So unlike Abrego Garcia, there's no reason to send him back to El Salvador.
No.
Because Abrego Garcia was from El Salvador. And it's a Trump-appointed district court judge, Stephanie Gallagher, who is ordering that the government facilitate his release and return to America. And the Fourth Circuit's upheld that decision as well. The Fourth Circuit was also very critical of what they call the contrivance of the governments to keep him in El Salvador. On April 23, Judge Gallagher ordered the government to bring him back. On May 4th, the Justice Department produced a document it called an indicative asylum decision issued by United States Citizenship and Immigration Services stating that they would deny his asylum claim on the basis of him being a TDA member. They signed it on the 1st of May after he'd been ordered to return. So they made up this bullshit asylum adjudication after the judge had said he should come back as a reason to keep him there. And the Fourth Circuit says, no, you're not doing that. No. But he's still in that El Salvador prison even now. So there's that as well.
That is very bad.
Do you have anything else to say about Abrego Garcia or this situation?
I think this is another instance of this administration trying to project what it thinks is strength, but is actually weakness. And we are seeing this all over the place. It is projecting weakness all over the place. It's trying to do things that it can't actually do. And it keeps failing. It keeps running into obstacles. And it keeps wasting time and wasting resources on this stuff. Like, how much time, how many resources are going to be wasted on trying to cover up one administrative mistake?
Yeah.
This is the question with Abrego Garcia.
Well, we've seen quite a few.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, look, there's no point staying on that topic. We've only got 4 minutes left. So is there anything else you want to talk about in any way? Anything you want to add?
Maybe you would like another trivia question.
Please. Another excuse to show that I'm an idiot. Let's do that.
Okay. Which state has the lowest average BMI in America? That is body mass index.
Okay, all right. I am going to guess walking state.
Okay.
New York.
It is not New York. It is
rich too. Yeah.
It is Colorado.
Oh my God! How did I get that? Hey, supervisor, did you get that? No, he didn't get that. Good.
But anyway, Peppers, feel free to post in the comments that you got it. You absolutely knew that. It was completely obvious.
Of course. They all do mountaineering. They ride bikes there.
I think also like that thin air has got to promote fitness, doesn't it?
Oh, my God. How do they do that? Dave, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I will see you next week.
See you next week.
I'll see you guys after the White Flash. You know I'm going to be going all the way to the line. We're going to be squeezing as much content as we can till 3:00. Stay peppy.
Stay peppy.
Welcome to the other side of the White Flash. This is Chaz Unleashed. And oh my God, we've got a lot to talk about that happened overnight. Let's start with the LA protests. We didn't really get to talk much about Gavin Newsom yesterday. I had a whole section on him, but we were running out of time. Basically, he's had all kinds of blatant attempts to try to elevate himself to be the face of Trump resistance during this protest saga. Obviously, he's trying to get the inside running for 2028. The whole "come arrest me, bro" saga is the most well-known example. But he gave a presidential-style speech as well. They released on YouTube for no reason other than to repeat everything he's been saying on Twitter about Trump, just again in speech form. He's been getting to seemingly endless Twitter slanging matches with the likes of J.D. Vance and Steve Miller. His publicity team has had a great series of posts, I have to say. In fact, they've been doing a great job overall, but they had a great series of posts based on the idea of reading out Trump's tweets in a Palpatine-like voice over Star Wars footage. For example,
a once great American city, Los Angeles, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals.
And yes, they do have Sith Miller tweets as well as part of the collection. I gotta say, even though I'm deeply cynical about what Newsom is up to, I have to admit those Star Wars tweet videos are a brilliant idea. They are very well executed as well. That's a good voice. I know it's AI, but still, good voice. Newsom's love of Twitter and memes and attention-grabbing stunts. It's all very Trumpian, actually, if you ask me. And, you know, those two are old-time friends as well. Trump often will refer to how much he likes Newsom. And he does, I think. I think he really likes Newsom. In fact, I think he wishes Newsom was his son. I think he likes him more than Don Jr. But we got 3 years to talk about that. So I'll leave that for now. I'll get a psychologist as a guest pepper one day to talk about that. As part of Newsom's election campaign, he also took Trump to court over his deployment of the National Guard. And we had an update on that overnight. A district court presided over by a Clinton judge, Charles Breyer, gave Newsom a restraining order on Trump's federalization of the National Guard. The main argument that the judge was interacting with from Newsom was that Trump he's called what's going on a rebellion for the purposes of using Section 12406, but it's not a rebellion. And Newsom made that point. It isn't and never was a rebellion. Quote, primarily peaceful protests with some acts of violence or civil disobedience do not rise to the level of a rebellion. Indeed, nothing about the scale of the protests or acts of violence set these events apart from other recent periods of significant social unrest. At no point in the past 3 days has there been a rebellion or an insurrection, nor have these protests risen to the level of protests or riots that Los Angeles and other major cities have seen at points in their past. Remember, that even there being a danger of a rebellion is enough to trigger Section 12406. But Breyer agreed with Newsom. He said the protests in Los Angeles fall far short of rebellion, adding that even when protests involve violence, there was not evidence that any of the violent protesters were attempting to overthrow the government as a whole, which he took as the definition of a rebellion. He didn't agree with the bit about not being able to execute federal laws either that I talked about earlier. So he felt Trump exceeded his statutory authority with his use of Section 12406. Although, interestingly, he didn't stop Trump's usage of the Marines, just the National Guard. Because with the Marines, he said he didn't think Trump needed a statute to deploy them. Like, he agreed that 12406 didn't deploy the Marines, but he said Trump just controls the Marines. He's the commander-in-chief, after all. As long as they respect posse comitatus, which is they don't practice law enforcement, domestic law enforcement, he said that they're cool. And so far, their respecting posse comitatus. So it was just the National Guard he blocked. That ruling's been blocked in its own right by the appeals court, by the way. They just go back and forth like they do. But yeah, this has been taken seriously, this case, and it may go to the Supreme Court. I have to say, this case is going further than I expected. I didn't think it would go very far. To be honest, I still don't think it has much of a chance, but it's going further than I thought. So, yeah, mea culpa. A lot of people have been writing to us about dystopian situations involving protests and militarization. And I skipped past that section a bit because we were running out of time. Thought I'd back over it now because I know you guys are very interested in that. Especially given I've been flagging this as one of my big concerns for almost a year now. When people were talking about Trump getting Adam Schiff executed and stuff, I was going, no, worry about like the protests, worry about that kind of thing. And we're now seeing it. We're seeing, in fact, a potential blueprint emerge in LA. ICE could ratchet up raids on non-criminals to hit their 3,000 person quotas. People then protest. Then Trump sends in the National Guard and Marines as a result. Protests escalate. And then you have an excuse for the Insurrection Act. Once you've got the Insurrection Act happening, you can declare martial law in blue cities. And you create chaos, and you use that chaos to assert authoritarian power generally. That's the blueprint, and that's what people are worried about. It's so clear to them. It's obviously clear to Stephen Miller. Just this week, MSNBC reported that the Trump administration is readying tactical ICE units known as Special Response Teams to conduct massive raids in 5 sanctuary regions: New York City, Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Northern Virginia. Apparently they're getting ready right now. I don't know if it's true. It's an MSNBC report. Maybe, maybe not. But hearing that certainly makes me nervous, I must admit. And Trump has, well, he's said some things that raise eyebrows.
You're not planning to affect the Insurrection Act. You still plan to send troops?
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden at this auto pen.
What's the bar for sending Marines?
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
The bar is what I think it is? That's not very reassuring. Of course, the obvious response to this, though, is he didn't do any of that stuff in his first term, did he? Why didn't he do it in his first term if he wanted to do that? Well, first of all, he was running for re-election. Now he's not. But more importantly than that, he had Milley and Esper as his Joint Chief of Staff and Defense Secretary. They were running interference against him. They didn't want any of that crap. Now he's got Hegseth, who is the ultimate yes man. Remember that shooting the leg clip I played before? That's the new Esper. That's not much resistance. This kind of thing that I'm about to play you, it doesn't exactly fill you with confidence about the independence of Hegseth and the military.
Standards, accountability, readiness, training, warfighting, lethality. We're not a college or a university. We're not interested in your woke garbage and your political correctness.
Oh, God. It's not a good situation. I know those people were hand-picked Republican fanboys in the army, but who are there in the crowd. But still, oh, my God. And yeah, DHS, FBI, DNI, they're all loyalists as well. So I just don't think you can trust any of these people to resist if Trump sends out orders. I mean, they might surprise us, but we shouldn't rely on it. Let's put it that way. And the main concern people express, which I already mentioned when I was talking to Richie in the last PEP Extra, Trump could declare martial law directly before an election and postpone it. It's been done. The Northern Mariana Islands delayed their election in 2018 after a typhoon. They're a territory of America, by the way. No, I didn't just pick a random country. Elections can be delayed, but they can't be delayed by Trump. That's the key. Seth Abramson, for example, in Blue Sky, this is a classic example, Donald Trump has become convinced that the Republicans cannot win the midterms and that a blue wave would effectively end his presidency and confront him with 2 years of investigations and impeachment proceedings. He needs martial law as an excuse to cancel the midterms. So America is on a clock now, he says. He's very confident he knows what Trump is thinking, isn't he? But my point is, Trump can't do it by himself. It takes Congress to move the election date. If the filibuster still exists, it requires the Democrats. If the filibuster still exists. But here's the important bit. Let's say they get rid of the filibuster. Let's say Trump convinces a whole bunch of congressional purple staters to commit electoral suicide by postponing the election, because that's what they're doing. If he wants the vote of swing district Republicans to postpone the election, those swing district Republicans are committing electoral suicide. They will get bundled out. Are they willing to do that for Trump? I don't think they are, but we'll see. Let's say he does. Let's say he somehow convinces Congress and they get rid of the filibuster to postpone the election. You know what happens then? What happens then is Mike Johnson becomes president. Because on January 20, the president stops being the president. He can't change that. Congress can't change that. It's in the Constitution. No one can change that. Trump is not going to be the president after January 20, 2029. J.D. Vance is not going to be the vice president unless he wins an election. They then go the next in line, which would be the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Would Trump tear up the Constitution just so Mike Johnson can be president? I doubt it. And even if he did, let's just say he did. Mike Johnson is not an authoritarian. He's a yes man and he's a brown noser. He's not an authoritarian. I'm not scared of Mike Johnson. So for those who are worried about the Fourth Reich or whatever, and and postponing elections and this is the last election, all that kind of stuff, I don't know how they do it in the Constitution. Okay. A question about the post-Big Beautiful Bill, which I actually talked about this on the pod, and I saw this question afterwards and thought, hey, great question, buddy. Let's answer it. Luke from Blue Sky. Does the funding for ICE in the Big Beautiful Bill contain money for immigration judges? If not, wouldn't that just lead to more catch and release, or can they circumvent the need for the judges by invoking the Insurrection Act? That really is a very good question, given that you didn't know we were talking about that. But you are absolutely right. Arresting more people doesn't mean more deportations. You're spot on, Luke. The choke point, as you say, is the courts. Last I saw, there was a 3.687 million case backlog in immigration courts with an average wait time of 636 days. That's an average wait time. If you're smart enough to head straight to New York or Miami or some other overloaded area when you come into America, you're looking at a 7 or 8 year waiting time before you go to immigration court. That's your choke point right there. And so I understand your thoughts, but the Big Beautiful Bill does contain $1.25 billion to hire immigration judges and expand courtroom capacity. And that will take a huge bite out of the backlog. There are currently about 700 immigration judges. $1.25 billion, you can hire at least 1,000, maybe 2,000 with that kind of money. So you're talking twice to triple, to maybe quadruple as many judges. So yeah, they genuinely might be able to crank up the deportation machine big time with the Big Beautiful Bill. But I don't even think that's part of the plan. Oh no, it's part of the plan, but I don't think it's the whole plan. They genuinely want to deport 10 million people in 3.5 years. That's not going to happen just by doubling or tripling immigration judges, especially given it will take a year to crank the machine up. It takes a certain amount of time to train and hire these people. There were 271,000 deportations last year. And Biden, honestly, going into the election, he was going as hard as he could. You need to go 15 times faster to get it done. Oh, also note, Biden was going faster than Trump is at the moment with deportations. Okay, and he would need to go 15 times faster. In reality, I think they'd settle for 1 million deportations a year, which I think is possible. Maybe not reasonable, but possible. But here's the main plan, in my view. I think they are hoping to ramp up the pressure with this new super steroided ICE as much as possible on migrants, to squeeze them hard, to be just chasing them down in the fields, to be turning up at their kids' schools, to be turning up when they're in hospital, to just be doing everything they possibly can to harass them, to get them sacked, to just make their life a misery until they just want to go, until they just wave the white flag. The State Department just opened an Office of Remigration, which is an interesting term, remigration. The State Department plan says the Office of Remigration will serve as the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration's hub for immigration issues and repatriation tracking. It will provide a policy platform for interagency coordination with DHS and other agencies on removals/repatriations and for interagency policy work to advance the President's immigration agenda. In Europe, the term remigration refers to all immigrants and non-assimilated citizens being forcibly removed with the goal of establishing a white ethno-state. That's what it means in Europe. Okay, it's a full-on racist thing in Europe. Taking actual citizens and sending them away. Now, obviously, that's not what it means in this case from what I've read you. But having said that, I think Trump trying to normalize the term remigration in America is a little bit disturbing. They actually first debuted the concept back in September when Trump tweeted out, "As president, I'll immediately end the migrant invasion of America. Will stop all migrant flights, end all illegal entries, terminate the Kamala phone app for smuggling illegals, revoke deportation immunity, suspend refugee resettlement, and return Kamala's illegal migrants to their home countries, also known as remigration." And Stephen Miller immediately retweeted that with the addition, "The Trump plan to end the invasion of small-town America, remigration." Miller likes to try to popularize new language. It's so obvious he fed that word to Trump. He introduces terms all the time and then repeats them in the hope that other Republicans will. Like at the moment, you might have noticed he's been trying to popularize the term suicidal migration. He's quite fond of that. So let's see if that catches on. During the anti-Semitic terror attacks, he's been saying, this is suicidal migration. Anyway, regardless, I'm pretty sure they're not using remigration in the European sense, at least not yet. Because at the same time as they've been doing this, rolling out this remigration office, they've been revving up what used to be called self-deportation. And I think that's what they mean. It's when you convince people to just leave on their own accord. 68 illegal immigrants from Honduras and Colombia 2 weeks ago opted to go back. The administration offered them a free flight home, a $1,000 debit card, and the opportunity to apply to legally immigrate to America at some future point. Because if you get deported, you just can't come back ever. Chrissy Noem said, "If you're here illegally, use the CBP Home app to take control of your departure and receive financial support to return home." To be honest, I'm actually okay with this move, the self-deportation thing. Saves money for the government. And if the migrants want to go home, sure, help them go home. It's good for them. They get money, they get the free flight, they can come back, potentially. Probably under a different administration. I don't see the downside of this, as long as they're making a free choice to do so. What I don't like, though, is if they then just make illegal immigrants' lives such a misery that they feel they have no choice but to self-deport. Then that's not their free will at all. That's just being assholes. But I think that's the plan. I think the plan is to make them self-deport by the millions because that's so much cheaper, so much easier. And then you can get 10 million people deporting themselves in 3 years. That's how they make it happen. We'll see how that goes. That's my theory. Okay, Iran obviously has gone nuts since we recorded yesterday. I'm going to leave that. I don't like to comment until I have something to say. Right now, there's no firm information. Also, I feel like everything we said yesterday still holds up anyway, so that's fine. It's just now context for what is going to happen over the next few days, and we'll have more to say about it next week, undoubtedly. A China trade deal was announced as well. I did talk about this on Planet America, but I'm just going to reiterate it now for those who only listen to the pod. I'll just summarize it. What we said yesterday holds up still. It still does, but let me give you the details of the supposed deal. Trump tweeted this out yesterday. "Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval with President Xi and me. Full magnets and any necessary rare earths will be supplied up front by China. Likewise, we will provide to China what was agreed to, including Chinese students using our colleges and universities, which has always been good with me. We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China's getting 10%. Relationship is excellent. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Thank you for attention to this matter. Drink. Anyway, while that sounds like an amazing deal for America, it is obviously suspiciously good, seen as China were holding the whip handle. So I looked hard into it, and yes, it's not a good deal. Firstly, it's not 55% to 10% tariffs across the board. It's 30% to 10%, which is what they were a month ago. They've just agreed to return to what they were. Trump's just adding 25% because he placed 25% on a few items in his first term, which haven't gone away yet. And so he's saying, basically as much as 55% is the concept. It's not 55% across the board, okay? Secondly, but the bottom line is it's just the same as it was a month ago. Secondly, like we foreshadowed in the pod, America has given up a bunch of those export restrictions onto China. We don't know which ones. They're not going to tell us. Trump is very keen for people not to know which ones they are. We know it's not their most valuable export restrictions, but clearly there's enough to make it worthwhile for China to do this deal. Thirdly, the rare earth licenses, they're for 6 months. Just for 6 months. And then China can come back for a second bite, probably to get more export restrictions relaxed, I imagine. Basically, China now has Trump over the same barrel that Trump hoped to have China over. He hoped to use tariffs, constantly threatening to raise tariffs to get China to keep on giving him concessions. China's doing that with their rare earth licenses. So that's where we're at. And yes, America is slightly further back than they were before this. Not that people in America would realize this because this has been so poorly covered in the media. So many people just reporting what Trump said as if it was a fact. Come on. The only outlet that seems completely across this, in my view, is the Wall Street Journal. I said that on Play America as well because I want to give them a hat tip because they have been fantastic lately. They've been kicking a lot of goals. So yeah, if you want to subscribe to one newspaper to know what's going on, I would actually suggest the Wall Street Journal. But anyway, you can just use the archive website and then you don't need to subscribe to any of them. Archive.md. Look, I'm out of time. Lockie's going to have to speed up half this podcast. That's enough for now. I had some more immigration stuff left over, but another time, more immigration. Until next week, you know what to do. Stay peppy.